Mars isn't what we thought it was. I've kept this to myself for far too long, and I don't think I can carry the weight anymore. Maybe writing it down will help. Maybe not. Either way, someone should know the truth before it's too late. If anyone reads this, don't dismiss it as the ramblings of a lunatic. I'm not crazy. Wish I were. Used to work at NASA. Officially, I was part of the public-facing missions, rovers, orbital studies, and things they let the world see. Unofficially, I was involved in something else, something hidden, something that makes me wish I'd never joined in the first place. It started in 2016 when the first classified images came back from Project Hermes. That's what we called it internally. Black-budget mission that had been ongoing for decades, quietly probing Mars in ways the public could never know. We weren't just looking for signs of microbial life. We were looking for something bigger, something familiar. And we found it. The first anomalies were dismissed as natural formations, weathered rock, wind patterns, volcanic activity. With more data, it became harder to deny what we saw. Beneath the dust storms and red desolation, we found structures, not just rocks shaped by chance, but deliberate architecture, crumbled towers, shattered domes, and sprawling grids buried beneath the Martian surface. It was ancient, older than anything we'd ever imagined. They brought me into the project when it was clear we weren't dealing with random geology. My expertise in planetary systems made me an asset, or so they told me. In truth, I think they brought me in because I was naive enough to still be excited about the discoveries. I didn't understand the implications, not then. It wasn't until we recovered the artifact that everything changed. They never let me see it in person. Few of us did. It was an obelisk, black as void and covered in intricate carvings. Patterns that didn't match anything in Earth's archaeological record. Or so we thought at first. The linguists worked on it for years before they made the breakthrough. The carvings weren't alien. They were human. That was the day we realized Mars wasn't a dead planet we'd stumbled upon in the vastness of space. It was home. Mars was our home. The artifact told a story, though it wasn't complete. Pieces we deciphered painted a grim picture. Mars had once been vibrant, oceans, forests, teeming with life. And then, humanity happened. The wars, the greed, the arrogance. It started small, territorial disputes, resources, borders. But the conflicts escalated until the entire planet was engulfed in fire. Nuclear war, ecological collapse. No one could say for sure how it ended. All we knew was that Mars had become uninhabitable. And yet, against impossible odds, some of them escaped. They found a way out of the dying world and journeyed across the void to Earth. We are the descendants of those survivors, refugees from a ruined world. Remember sitting in the lab when I first read the translated text. My chest felt tight, my breath shallow. I kept telling myself it couldn't be true. It had to be some cosmic coincidence, a shared evolutionary path, something, anything, but the truth was inescapable. The genetic markers, the shared cultural motifs, the timeline. It all aligned. We destroyed one planet already, and now we're doing it again. The higher-ups at NASA decided the public couldn't know. It would destabilize everything, they said. They weren't wrong. Religion, history, politics, it would all collapse under the weight of this revelation. But I can't help thinking that's what we need. A collapse. A reset. Because if we don't change course, if we don't stop the wars and the greed and the mindless consumption, Earth will follow Mars into oblivion. And this time, there won't be another planet to flee to. Do you understand what I'm saying? There's nowhere else to go. The nearest habitable worlds are light years away, and we don't have the technology to get there. Earth is all we have, but we're blind to the precipice we're teetering on, just as we were before. And sometimes, late at night, I wonder if it's already too late. The signs are there, Melting ice caps, mass extinctions, choking skies. It's starting again. The same cycle, the same death march. And I don't know how to stop it. What terrifies me most isn't that we're repeating history. It's the idea that we might not even be capable of change. Perhaps we are creatures of destruction, destined to destroy world after world until nothing remains. I wish I could say I have hope, but I don't, not anymore. All I have is this overwhelming sense of dread, this crushing certainty that we're hurtling toward our doom, and no one cares enough to stop it. Mars isn't what we thought it was, and Earth won't be, either, when we're done with it. Mars isn't what we thought it was. I've kept this to myself for far too long, and I don't think I can carry the weight anymore. Maybe writing it down will help. Maybe not. Either way, someone should know the truth before it's too late. If anyone reads this, don't dismiss it as the ramblings of a lunatic. I'm not crazy. Wish I were. Used to work at NASA. Officially, I was part of the public-facing missions, rovers, orbital studies, and things they let the world see. Unofficially, I was involved in something else, something hidden, something that makes me wish I'd never joined in the first place. It started in 2016 when the first classified images came back from Project Hermes. That's what we called it internally. Black budget mission that had been ongoing for decades, quietly probing Mars in ways the public could never know. We weren't just looking for signs of microbial life. We were looking for something bigger, something familiar. And we found it. The first anomalies were dismissed as natural formations, weathered rock, wind patterns, volcanic activity. With more data, it became harder to deny what we saw. Beneath the dust storms and red desolation, we found structures, not just rocks shaped by chance, but deliberate architecture, crumbled towers, shattered domes, and sprawling grids buried beneath the Martian surface. It was ancient, older than anything we'd ever imagined. They brought me into the project when it was clear we weren't dealing with random geology. My expertise in planetary systems made me an asset, or so they told me. In truth, I think they brought me in because I was naive enough to still be excited about the discoveries. I didn't understand the implications, not then. It wasn't until we recovered the artifact that everything changed. They never let me see it in person. Few of us did. It was an obelisk, black as void and covered in intricate carvings. Patterns that didn't match anything in Earth's archaeological record. Or so we thought at first. The linguists worked on it for years before they made the breakthrough. The carvings weren't alien. They were human. That was the day we realized Mars wasn't a dead planet we'd stumbled upon in the vastness of space. It was home. Mars was our home. The artifact told a story. Though it wasn't complete, the pieces we deciphered painted a grim picture. Mars had once been vibrant, oceans, forests, teeming with life. And then, humanity happened. The wars, the greed, the arrogance. It started small, territorial disputes, resources, borders. But the conflicts escalated until the entire planet was engulfed in fire. Nuclear war, ecological collapse. No one could say for sure how it ended. All we knew was that Mars had become uninhabitable. And yet, against impossible odds, some of them escaped. They found a way out of the dying world and journeyed across the void to Earth. We are the descendants of those survivors, refugees from a ruined world. Remember sitting in the lab when I first read the translated text. My chest felt tight, my breath shallow. I kept telling myself it couldn't be true. It had to be some cosmic coincidence, a shared evolutionary path, something, anything, but the truth was inescapable. The genetic markers, the shared cultural motifs, the timeline. It all aligned. We destroyed one planet already, and now we're doing it again. The higher-ups at NASA decided the public couldn't know. It would destabilize everything, they said. They weren't wrong. Religion, history, politics, It would all collapse under the weight of this revelation. But I can't help thinking that's what we need. A collapse. A reset. Because if we don't change course, if we don't stop the wars and the greed and the mindless consumption, Earth will follow Mars into oblivion. And this time, there won't be another planet to flee to. Do you understand what I'm saying? There's nowhere else to go. The nearest habitable worlds are light years away, and we don't have the technology to get there. Earth is all we have, but we're blind to the precipice we're teetering on, just as we were before. And sometimes, late at night, I wonder if it's already too late. The signs are there: melting ice caps, mass extinctions, choking skies. It's starting again. The same cycle, the same death march. And I don't know how to stop it. What terrifies me most isn't that we're repeating history. It's the idea that we might not even be capable of change. Perhaps we are creatures of destruction, destined to destroy world after world until nothing remains. I wish I could say I have hope, but I don't, not anymore. All I have is this overwhelming sense of dread, this crushing certainty that we're hurtling toward our doom, and no one cares enough to stop it. Mars isn't what we thought it was, and Earth won't be, either, when we're done with it. The monster out at Uncle Rob's place. I think I was about 7 or 8 at the time when this occurred. My parents had been divorced since I was 5, and so they had shared custody of me. My dad had me for the weekend, and every other week, typically on a Friday, we would go out to my Uncle Rob's, who lived in the sticks. My dad and he and a few other guys would meet and go to his garage in the back to shoot the bull, smoke, and play either poker, ping pong, darts, or whatever. I always liked this because I got to stay up a little later and got to visit my cousin Cassie. Plus we went to Blockbuster, and he let me rent a couple of movies, get a couple of Reese's peanut butter cups, and we had Mickey D's for dinner on the way up. We made the 45-minute drive out into the boonies, and I got excited when Dad drove up the long driveway, and I could see the dim amber glow of Uncle Rob's porch light. We parked next to 2 other pickup trucks, and I immediately got out with my Blockbuster sack of Reese's and 2 movies, rushed to the door, and rang the doorbell. My dad was just coming up the steps of the porch when my cousin Cassie greeted us and let us in. I hugged her and went to bear hug Uncle Rob as he kneeled down to greet me. "Ah, you're getting big, Mikey. Your daddy feeding you Miracle-Gro," Uncle Rob said jokingly as I hugged him as tight as I could. "We had McDonald's," I blurted out. After that, my dad and Uncle Rob exchanged greetings and went to the kitchen with the guys. Before he did, my dad kneeled down to me and said, "All right, kid, you know the rules. You behave yourself, Hawk." "I will," I replied assuredly. "All right, we're going out back now. Remember, the 2-way by the back door." "I will," repeated. My dad and the guys left the back door for the garage. Cassie and I made our way into the living room, and I gave her one of the Reese's and the movies. "What do you want to watch first? Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles or Aladdin?" I asked, presenting the VHS covers to her. "I want to watch Turtles," she replied. I then handed her the movie, and she went to go turn the TV on and put the movie in the VCR. "I'm going to make some popcorn," she said as she ran into the kitchen. Just sat on the couch and watched the previews. A few minutes later, the movie had just started, and she brought out the popcorn in a plastic green bowl, and we shared it along with the Reese's while we watched Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I think it was more than an hour later, and Cassie said that she had to go to the bathroom. She left the room, and I stayed watching the movie. I was resting my head on the arm of the sofa, and I suppose I nodded off while the movie was playing. I then slowly started to wake up and stretched my arms and legs. Then noticed that the TV displayed static and the soft white noise emanating from it. I looked around the room and noticed that the living room lights were off, but the kitchen light was illuminating from the next room. I then realized that Cassie was nowhere to be found. Cassie. I called out to her, but there was no response. I call out to her again, and there is still no response. I began to yell out to her, but there was still no response. I didn't know what to make of this, so I got up from the couch and called out to her while walking into the kitchen. It was all too quiet except for the ceiling fan still spinning and wobbling. I looked up at the clock hanging on the wall above the fridge and saw that it was past 9:30. I couldn't tell if I was reading the time right or if the clock was broken, but I could see the second hand ticking. I went back into the darkened living room and looked at the digital display of the VCR, and it read 9:34 p.m. Usually, my dad and I would have been on the road by now around that time, and he would have me in bed by 10. CSI, I shouted almost at the top of my lungs. I then felt this dread creeping onto me, as if I was all alone in this house. Where did she go? I've had no responses to my continuous yelling for her. I went to the bathroom door and saw in the space below that the light was still on. Cassie. I knocked on the door. Are you in here? But there was no answer back. As I entered the bathroom, the light was still on. She wasn't in here either. Then went to the two-way radio near the back door and pressed the button to speak. Dad. Uncle Rob. Are you there? Released the button, but there was only the white noise of static. After waiting for a response, I tried again. Dad. Uncle Rob. Are you there? I asked, edging on desperation and fear. I looked out the window of the back door and saw the outside and inside lights of the garage were still on. I tried the radio again, but there was still no answer from anyone. Just static. The thought of going out to the garage at night was already creepy enough. Did I really have to walk to the garage alone at night? Tried the radio a few more times before giving up on it, and concluded that I would have to go to the garage, in the dark, by myself. I wanted Cassie to be here with me. I wanted my dad and Uncle Rob. I didn't want to be here anymore. Forced myself to open the back door, then the screen door. I stuck my head out, scanning my immediate surroundings. After seeing the coast was clear, I slowly stepped out onto the back porch, and I started shivering, even though it was a warm September night. Cautiously made my way down the back door steps, and my body tensed up. Crept towards the light of the garage, trying not to make any crunching noises under my feet. Then realized, as I was trying to keep silent, that I normally heard crickets and all that, but it was all eerily quiet. I felt like I was completely alone. It felt like the garage was a mile away, and I was completely on edge with every step I took. I quickened my pace as soon as I was close to the light of the garage and burst through the door. "Dad!" I yelled as soon as I entered the garage, but there was no one here. The smell of cigarette smoke wafted in the air. The radio was playing the country music they usually listened to, and there were playing cards left scattered on the table. But where did everyone go? Where's Uncle Rob? Dad? Where is everyone? The dread started to creep more into me, and I swear I was just about to panic. Suddenly, I heard the muffled, distant noise of a gunshot echoing outside that broke my train of thoughts. Then another one. Then several more, to where I got so scared that I ran back into the house as fast as I could and slammed the door behind me. Then heard a couple more gunshots, but then I heard a high-pitched shriek, which made my blood run cold, and I turned to look outside the window, keeping my head low. I didn't see anything, but I could hear another distant shriek. I've never heard anything like this before. I had a feeling that it wasn't an owl or a deer or anything that I've heard out here on Uncle Rob's place. I then could hear some shouting echoing, "Dad? Uncle Rob. I searched for anything to appear in the garage's outside light, but several minutes passed, and there was nothing. Then walked into the kitchen, lifted myself up on the sink, and looked out the window. I continued to look out into the darkness until I heard my name. Mikey. I heard a voice coming from outside. Mikey. It sounded like Uncle Rob. I was looking out to see if I could see him, but nothing came into view. A few minutes passed, and I heard Uncle Rob calling my name again, Mikey. I was about to run outside to call back out to him until I saw a shadowy figure from a distance. I couldn't make out exactly what it looked like, but I could see it was a tall, lanky figure that lurched stiffly and so inhuman. Froze staring at this thing moving across the yard, twitching disgustingly, and I think I heard it hiss, and I felt the hairs on the back of my neck sticking up. Mikey. It was Uncle Rob's voice, but this wasn't Uncle Rob that I was seeing out the window. It turned its head towards me, and I saw the eyeless face of a monster. I panicked and I fell onto the floor, struggling to get myself in a kitchen cabinet. I was able to hide in a cabinet where I had an angled but clear view of the kitchen window, and I watched the window through the crack of the slightly open cabinet door. I don't know how much time had passed, but nothing was happening, and I began to calm down. I was about to come out when I suddenly saw the monster's head appear at the window, and a cold shiver instantly went up my spine, and the hairs stood back up again. It pressed its hideous, pale, and eyeless face against the glass, and slid it around as if trying to get a better view inside. The face looked almost horse-like, but the muzzle was shorter and gaunt. It bared its teeth, but I don't think it had any lips or anything that would hide them. Its nostrils flared, and would leave fogged spots that quickly dissipated on the window. Mikey. It barely moved its mouth to speak using Uncle Rob's exact voice. Mikey. The sound of Uncle Rob's voice coupled with its grotesque face had me totally unsettled. Why did it sound like Uncle Rob? Let me in, Mikey. Oh, hell no. There was no way I was leaving this cabinet to let that creature in. Suddenly, I heard a couple of gunshots ringing out along with some men yelling. The creature let out a shriek as it fled away from the window. As soon as I heard it shriek, I almost vomited. How can something like this exist? Why was it here? And how did it know my name? Soon the shrieking faded away in the distance, and a couple of the men shouted to each other while I still hid in the cabinet. Moments later, I heard the back door fly open and my dad's voice calling. Michael. He called out. Michael, where are you? He sounded frantic. Didn't come out as believing that it was that pale monster until I saw my dad come into the kitchen. Michael, he called out, and I immediately spilled out of the cabinet onto the floor. Dad, I responded. He picked me up off the ground and threw me over his shoulder. We gotta go, Michael, he said with a panic that I've never heard before in his voice. He carried me out the front door into his pickup, where he opened the driver's side and actually threw me in onto the passenger's side as he hopped in and started the truck. We peeled out of the driveway and sped off onto the dirt road. Dad, what's going on? I started to cry. I'll tell you later. We need to get out of here first. His eyes never left the road. All I did was hold my arms and cry as my dad was driving us out. Some time later, we were back on the smooth, paved road heading home, and everything started to calm down at that point. Dad turned his head to look behind him, and he let out a sigh of relief. He turned to me and asked, "You ok, Mikey?" His voice now took on a calmer and more fatherly tone. What's happening? What was that monster? I sniffled, wanting an explanation. My dad turned to look at the road and shook his head. I don't know, Mikey, he said in a tone that unsettled me once again. I don't know. All I knew was that I had to get you out of there. What about Cassie? I inquired. Uncle Rob's gonna take care of her. He told me to get you out of there while he and everyone else hunted that thing down. He replied. Did you see her? I prodded more. No, can't say that I had. I'm sure she's safe, Mikey. He assured me, but I was still worried. We had driven so many miles down the road, and we started to see the lights from the town that we're returning to. Listen, my dad broke the silence, which made me jump a little. For now, don't tell your mom what happened. I'll do that. We called the police a while ago, and they should be on their way to help out Uncle Rob. I'm sure we'll hear from them tomorrow. Och. Och. I replied, still worrying about Cassie and Uncle Rob. There was not a word said between us on the rest of the drive home. The exhibit. I wasn't supposed to be there. No one was. The human zoo wasn't advertised on billboards, and you couldn't find it on Google. It was an urban myth, the kind of place whispered about in online forums or during drunken conversations. People said it was hidden deep in the woods, far off the beaten path, where only the truly curious or foolish would venture. The rumors claimed it wasn't animals in cages, but humans, each one a living nightmare. Most people laughed it off. I should have too. But then Alex sent me a link. It was nothing more than GPS coordinates and the message, you need to see this. Alex was always chasing the next thrill, always pushing boundaries. He hadn't responded to my messages since, but I assumed he was being his usual self, cryptic and dramatic, so I did what I shouldn't have done. I got in my car and followed the coordinates. The road narrowed as I drove, the trees on either side thick and menacing, their skeletal branches clawing at the sky. The gravel crunched louder than it should have beneath my tires, and the fading sunlight barely pierced the canopy. By the time I reached the end of the coordinates, the sun had completely disappeared, leaving only the eerie glow of my headlights to illuminate the world ahead. There it was. Towering chain-link fence, rusted and worn, with barbed wire curling menacingly along the top. A wooden sign hung crookedly from the gate, its faded letters barely legible, T-H-E-H-U-N-Z-O. A shiver ran down my spine, but I told myself it was just an elaborate art project. Prank. Something edgy and harmless. I was already here, so what harm could it do to look? Pushed open the gate. The first thing I noticed was the smell, like wet soil and old metal, sharp and invasive. Rows of cages stretched into the shadows, each one lit by a single flickering bulb hanging overhead. The weak light cast harsh, trembling shadows, and my footsteps sounded too loud on the dirt path as I approached the first cage. Inside was a man, thin and pale, hunched over a desk cluttered with papers and a keyboard that wasn't connected to anything. The plaque on the cage read, "The Workaholic." He typed furiously, his fingers flying over the keys, his lips moving silently as if reading from an invisible script. Then he froze, his head snapped up, and for the first time, I noticed his eyes, bloodshot, wild and staring straight at me. "Do you need it now?" he rasped. "I can finish it tonight. Just give me a little more time." I stumbled back, my heart racing. His voice was desperate, hoarse, like he hadn't slept in days. His hands twitched as if ready to start typing again. He wasn't talking to me, or was he? I hurried past the cage, my pulse hammering in my ears. The next cage held a young woman, seated cross-legged on the floor in front of a cracked phone. The plaque read, "The Influencer." The ring light bathed her face in harsh white light as she posed for an imaginary audience. Her smile was wide, painfully forced, her lipstick smudged at the corners. "Hi, guys," she chirped, her voice unnaturally bright. "Don't forget to like and subscribe." She shifted her pose, angling her face toward the phone's shattered screen. "This is my raw, unfiltered moment," she whispered, her tone trembling with suppressed hysteria. Her eyes darted to me for the briefest of moments, and I froze. "Are you my follower?" she asked, her smile faltering. Then, suddenly, "Don't go." Her voice cracked, and her hand shot out toward the bars. "Don't leave me here. I'm real, I swear." I backed away, tripping over a rock, and scrambled to my feet. Each cage I passed felt worse than the last. There was a teenage boy, surrounded by piles of books, scribbling equations into a notebook with raw, ink-stained fingers. His cage was labeled the Overachiever. He muttered incoherently, reciting formulas and facts like a broken record. His hands shook, his breathing uneven, but he didn't stop writing. Tried to tell myself it wasn't real. It couldn't be. But the rawness of their voices, the desperation in their movements, was impossible to fake. Then I reached the spectator. The cage was different, emptier. A single chair sat in the middle, and in it was a man, slumped forward, staring at a screen mounted on the wall. The plaque on the cage read, "The Spectator." Curious, I stepped closer, craning my neck to see what he was watching. The screen displayed live footage of me. I froze, a cold wave of dread washing over me. The angle was unmistakable. It was filming me from behind, standing in front of the cage. The man in the chair stirred, his head lifting slightly. His face was slack, emotionless, but his eyes, they were alive, sharp and piercing as they locked onto mine. His mouth moved, forming words I couldn't hear. Then, suddenly, his whisper broke through the silence. "Do you like the show?" I stumbled back, nearly falling. My heart pounded in my chest as the man's lips curled into a faint smile. The footage on the screen shifted, now showing me stumbling away. I ran. My legs carried me blindly through the rows of cages, the exhibits screaming at me as I passed. Their voices overlapped into a chaotic cacophony. "Take me with you. Don't leave. You can't escape." Turned a corner and skidded to a halt. I was back where I started, standing in front of the spectator's cage. But now, the chair was empty. Before I could process what was happening, I felt it. Presence behind me. Slowly, I turned, and my breath caught in my throat. Figures dressed in black uniforms stood in a line, their faces obscured by smooth, featureless masks. They hadn't made a sound, but now they were there, blocking the only exit. "Wait," I stammered, my voice shaking. "I didn't mean to come here. I'll leave. Promise I won't tell a soul." One of the figures stepped forward, raising a gloved hand to point behind me. I turned, trembling, to look at the cage. Inside, someone was sitting in the chair. It was me. My doppelganger sat in the same hunched position, staring blankly at the screen. The footage now showed the masked figures closing in on the real me. Turned back to plead, but they were already moving, their hands grabbing me, cold and unyielding. I screamed, thrashing against their grip, but it was useless. They dragged me backward, toward the cage. The last thing I saw before the door slammed shut was my reflection on the screen. My face was frozen in silent terror. Now I sit in the chair, unable to move. The screen plays new footage, showing a man hesitantly stepping through the gates marked THE-HUMNZO. I found my classmate's YouTube channel. She has been missing for years. It started as an innocent rabbit hole on YouTube. I had been scrolling aimlessly through suggested videos late at night when her face stopped me cold. Samantha. She'd been missing for over 3 years. Our whole high school had been shaken to the core when she disappeared without a trace. Posters went up around town, search parties were organized, and theories swirled. Maybe she'd run away, or maybe something worse. Eventually, people moved on, but seeing her face in the thumbnail of a makeup tutorial froze me. The video title read, "Soft Glam Look That'll Make Him Love You." It had to be her. Same fiery red hair, same piercing green eyes. But something about her looked off. Her skin was too pale, her smile too stiff. I clicked the video. The intro was bubbly and upbeat. "Hey, lovelies. Samantha chirped, brushing her hair back. Welcome back to my channel. Today, we're going to do a soft glam look that's just to die for. That voice. It was definitely her. But there was something robotic about her delivery, as though someone had written a script for her, and she was forcing herself to sound cheerful. Her movements were too precise, almost unnatural, as if she were a puppet on strings. I kept watching, trying to ignore the growing chill running down my spine. Halfway through the video, when she started blending eyeshadow, her hand slipped, smearing dark powder across her cheek. She froze. For a second, her bright, toothy smile faltered, and she looked directly into the camera, into me. Her eyes weren't just green. They were bloodshot, filled with an almost imperceptible plea for help. The video glitched for a moment, and when it resumed, she was smiling again, the smudge gone as if it had never happened. I clicked on her channel. There were dozens of videos. They all followed the same formula. Samantha doing her makeup, offering tips, and giving unnervingly cheerful commentary. But the more I watched, the more I noticed the cracks. Shadows moved in the background where there shouldn't have been any. Faint whispers occasionally bled into the audio. And then there were her eyes, which sometimes darted to the side, as if checking for someone, or something, just off screen. The strangest part, the upload dates. The first video had been posted 2 weeks after she went missing. My heart raced as I scrolled through the comments. Most were from people praising her makeup skills, but occasionally, there were odd ones. Asterisk, why does she look so scared? Asterisk, anyone else hear the crying in the background at 3:17? Asterisk, this channel gives me the creeps. Something's wrong. I decided to dig deeper. I downloaded one of her videos and ran it through audio software, amplifying the background noise. What I heard made my stomach churn, soft, muffled sobbing. And beneath that, a voice, deep, gravelly, and angry. Keep smiling, or else. I slammed my laptop shut and tried to shake off the creeping dread, but I couldn't let it go. I needed answers. The next day, I skipped class and drove to her old house. Her parents had moved away after her disappearance, but the house was still empty, the FORSALE sign swaying in the overgrown yard. Parked across the street and stared at the dark windows, trying to piece together what to do next. Then my phone buzzed. A notification from YouTube. Samantha had just uploaded a new video. The title made my blood run cold. Special guest does my makeup. I clicked it. The video started normally, with Samantha smiling brightly at the camera. But then she said, "I have someone very special here with me today. Say hi." The camera panned to the guest. It was me. My heart stopped as I stared at the screen. There I was, sitting stiffly next to her, my face pale and expressionless. She picked up a makeup brush and started applying blush to my cheeks, giggling like nothing was wrong. "You're such a wonderful model," she said, her voice trembling slightly. The version of me in the video didn't react. He just sat there, staring blankly ahead. I scrambled to pause the video, but my phone froze. The screen flickered, and the video glitched, Samantha's face warping into something grotesque, her smile stretching impossibly wide, her eyes hollowing out into dark voids. Then, the video ended abruptly. Before I could process what I'd just seen, my phone buzzed again. A notification. Comment on the video. From Samantha. "See you soon. I found my little sister's diary. I wish I hadn't. My little sister, Emily, always loved keeping a diary. She had stacks of them. Pastel covers with little locks, each one filled with messy handwriting and stickers. She used to guard them fiercely, threatening to tell on me if I so much as looked at them. But Emily passed away 3 months ago. She was only 11. Freak accident at the lake. She fell in, hit her head on a rock, and drowned before anyone could get to her. The funeral was unbearable, and afterward, I couldn't bring myself to touch her things. Her room remained untouched, like a shrine to the girl she used to be. But last week, Mom asked me to start sorting through her belongings. I found her latest diary in the bottom drawer of her desk. It was unlocked. Thought reading it might bring me some closure. Thought it would help me feel close to her again. I was wrong. The first few entries were normal. Today we had pizza for dinner. I took 2 slices before Joey could get them all. He got mad, but I don't care. That made me smile. Emily always loved teasing me. The next few pages were full of harmless ramblings, complaints about school, doodles of flowers and stars, lists of her favorite songs. But then, about halfway through, the tone started to change. I saw the man again today. He was standing in the backyard, watching me through the window. Told Mom, but she said I was imagining things. He's always there, though. I can feel him. The man? I paused, flipping back through the earlier entries. No mention of him before. Maybe it was just Emily's overactive imagination. She'd always been a little jumpy, a little too eager to believe in monsters under the bed. I kept reading. The man came closer last night. He tapped on my window. He didn't say anything, just smiled at me. His teeth are so big. I wanted to scream, but I was too scared. I felt a chill run down my spine. Emily's handwriting got messier with each entry, her words more frantic. He comes inside now. He stands at the foot of my bed while I pretend to sleep. He whispers my name. He says he's waiting. Waiting for what? I flipped to the last few pages, my heart pounding. Joey doesn't see him. No one does. He told me not to tell. He said they wouldn't believe me. He said I belong to him now. I stopped reading. My hands were shaking. This had to be some kind of prank. A made-up story Emily wrote to scare me. But the way she described it, the fear in her words, it felt real. Too real. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about the diary. I couldn't shake the image of Emily, lying in bed, too terrified to scream while some stranger stood over her. I barely slept. When I finally drifted off, I dreamed about her. She was standing at the edge of the lake, staring at me with wide, unblinking eyes. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. When I woke up, I was drenched in sweat, and there was mud on my shoes. Told myself it was nothing. Maybe I'd gone outside to clear my head and didn't remember. But the next day, I found a page from Emily's diary lying on my desk. Hadn't brought the diary upstairs. The page wasn't one I'd read before. He says Joey will come next. He says Joey will join me soon. My blood turned to ice. That night, I locked my bedroom door. I tried to convince myself it was all in my head, that grief was playing tricks on me. But as I lay there, staring at the ceiling, I heard it. A tap, tap, tap. On my window. I didn't want to look. I couldn't, but something made me turn my head. He was there. A man, tall and thin, his face pale and stretched like wax. He smiled at me, baring rows of jagged teeth, and pressed a single finger to his lips. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. When I woke up, it was morning. The window was locked. No sign of anyone outside. I almost convinced myself it was a dream until I went downstairs and found another page from Emily's diary on the kitchen table. He says it's time. He says Joey belongs to him now. I haven't slept since. I haven't left the house. Keep hearing taps at the windows, whispers in the dark. Last night, I found muddy footprints leading from the lake to my bedroom door. Think I understand now. Emily didn't fall. She didn't hit her head. He took her. And now, he's coming for me. My wife just admitted that she's an alcoholic. And it doesn't stop there. I think I need to go to rehab. My heart dropped when I heard that. It came out of nowhere. The woman I was married to and living with had been struggling in the throes of addiction, and I was none the wiser. I had never felt so taken aback. "Carrie, what do you mean? I don't understand where this is coming from," I said, gingerly taking her hand in mine. "Exactly what I said. Need help, John. I've been drinking again. Like a lot." My mouth involuntarily fell open. Carrie had admitted to having alcohol dependency after graduating from college, but I had always been under the impression that she'd nipped it in the bud. "Honey, how long has this been going on?" "Never would have guessed if you hadn't told me," I replied, stepping back. "I know," she said, tears welling in her eyes. "It's been 6 months. I've been drinking vodka to hide the smell. That nightly glass of wine. It's actually cranberry juice and Smirnoff. I've been throwing the empty bottles in the dumpster behind my work so you wouldn't catch on. I'm sorry that I kept this from you. Really am. I just couldn't bear the thought of losing you over it." Carrie broke down, tears streaking down her cheeks. Hey, I would never leave you over something like that. You are the love of my life. We'll get through this together," I reassured her, gently rubbing her back. "Really? That makes me delighted to hear." She wrapped her arms around me, and she stayed there for a long time, sobbing into my shirt. "Thank you for being so accepting. I needed that," Carrie said, finally pulling away. "That's what I'm here for. I'll support you no matter what, but there's something that I need to know. Anything for you. I need you to be honest with me. Is that all you're hiding?" Her eyes widened, and I could see the wheels turning in her head. No, this was it. There's nothing else going on. "Carrie, don't lie to me. We've been married for 13 years. I know when you're not telling the truth." "Fine. I've been going to a support group, for alcoholics." My brows furrowed. "'Kay. And why did you feel the need to keep that from me?" "Because it's not working." This was a lot to get off my chest. "I don't want to talk about it anymore." "All right, but we're going to revisit this later." She nodded before darting into our room and locking the door. I didn't know what she was playing at, but I knew that my wife wasn't telling the truth. Not all of it, at least. And I was determined to find out what she was hiding. Now, I wish I would have just left her alone. Carrie didn't check herself into rehab right away. She said that she had to make some preparations before being admitted. No problem there. What was an issue was the late nights that she would spend out with people she claimed to be friends or coworkers or family. I knew better. Each time Carrie would tell me that she was coming home late, I'd check her location. She's not the best with technology, so I'd wager a guess that she forgot that she shared it with me. And I used that to my advantage. Whenever my wife made up an excuse not to come home, her phone said that she was always at one spot, the abandoned church on the outskirts of town. So I did what any suspicious husband would do. Tried to catch her in the act. "Look, man, I don't know if this is the best idea," my coworker Jeremy said as I neared the parking lot. "Oh yeah. Well, what would you do in this situation?" "I'd probably just, call the cops or something." "Really? And tell them what?" "That my wife might be boinking some random dude in an empty church. They'd be more likely to write me a ticket for filing a false report." "Whatever, man. I tried to warn you. Good luck." And with that, the line went dead. "Thanks, I guess," I grumbled, slapping the car in park and pocketing my phone. Glanced up at the rundown building before me, steeling myself for what I was about to do. The church was even creepier in person. Fire had left it completely charred, evidenced by the imprints left around the shattered windows. Vines snaked along the exterior, lending to the place's eerie ambience. I really didn't want to have to go in there, but I knew that I didn't have any other choice. After reassuring myself in the rearview mirror for what must have been at least 10 minutes, I finally gathered the courage to go inside. I crept up to the entrance, my eyes darting frantically around the parking lot. I felt like I was doing something wrong. Like one misstep would have the local police force swarming me in an instant. Quietly pushed open the front door, breathing a sigh of relief when it didn't creak. The church was dark, but I could see a faint light emitting from one of the rooms toward the back. My heart jackhammered in my chest. Was I really doing this? What if Carrie found out? It would break her. No, she wasn't being honest with me, and I had to know why. I couldn't afford to turn and run. Not after making it so far. Pressed forward, following a path that had been cleared through the debris. Aside from that, the interior looked just as I imagined it had the day of the fire. Everything had been burnt to a crisp, save for a marble statue of the Virgin Mary near what used to be a stained glass window. I shuddered when I saw it. It felt as if its eyes were following me around the room, casting judgment on me. After a painstakingly long time trying to remain silent, I finally made it to the source of the light. Cautiously peeked my head around the corner to what I assumed was someone's hollowed-out office. What I saw still haunts me to this day. Carrie, along with about 4 other pale figures in hooded robes, was gathered around a man's flayed corpse. His organs had been carved out, and the group was chanting in an unintelligible language. Beneath the body lay what appeared to be a pentagram. I ducked out of view, clutching my chest and trying to stifle my breathing. This couldn't be happening. I began to question everything I knew about my wife. I couldn't believe what I had just seen. I did the only logical thing I could do at that moment. I hightailed it out of there. Crept out of the church as quickly as I could without alerting any of those lunatics, and I raced home, going well over the speed limit. As I arrived back at the house, I tried my best to steady myself. Hot tears stung my eyes as I pulled out my phone. I didn't want to do it, but I knew that I had to. I steeled my resolve, and I called the police on my wife. "Hello, 911. What is your emergency?" "I think I just saw a cult ritual. There was this guy, and he was." I nearly vomited just recanting the gruesome scene, but I managed to keep it down. "The man was dead. Please, you have to send someone. It was at the old church on 5th Avenue. "All right, sir, stay calm. I'm sending a squad car." "Are you in the vicinity?" "What? No, I'm safe." My eyes grew wide, and for a moment, I thought that I might pass out. Just then, I received a text from Carrie. My breathing shallowed as I opened it. There was a picture. One of my cars is sitting in the church parking lot. It was followed by a close-up of me in the driver's seat. My heart thumped wildly in my chest as a text bubble appeared. "We need to talk. If you tell Anyone about this, you'll be next." "Hello? Sir, are you still on the line?" the operator asked, pulling me out of it. "What did the man look like?" I'm not sure. I'm sorry, but I have to go." Hung up before she had a chance to protest. Didn't waste any time. I packed what I could in the few precious minutes that I had, and I left. I have a feeling that I just messed with some very powerful people. I'm going to get as far away from that town as possible, no matter the cost. I'm not sure what's next for me. I wish I never waved to the man who watched me. Every evening at precisely 10:00 p.m., the man appeared in the window across from mine. I first noticed him on a foggy October night. I was pacing around my tiny apartment, trying to work out a problem for a client, when my gaze wandered to the old building across the street. Through the dim haze, I could just make out a figure, barely visible, framed in the dusty glass of an upstairs window. At first, I thought nothing of it. He was probably just a neighbor, taking a quick look outside. But the next night, at exactly 10:00 p.m., There he was again, standing in that same spot, staring into the street. Something about the way he stood made my skin crawl. His face was barely visible, shrouded in shadow, but I could make out the pale outline of his eyes. He was watching me. I closed the blinds that night, uneasy. But every evening after that, no matter how hard I tried to ignore him, I felt his presence. Curiosity, or perhaps a growing sense of dread, got the better of me. Each night, I would watch the clock, my heart pounding, until the hour struck 10. And there he would be. Days turned into weeks, and the man never missed a night. Always standing in the same spot, in the same eerie, unbroken silence. He never waved, never moved, just watched, as though waiting for something. One night, I decided to wave to him. I wanted to see if he'd respond. As soon as the clock hit 10, I pulled back the blinds and raised my hand, hesitantly, toward the window. His eyes met mine, and for a brief moment, I thought he was going to lift his own hand. Instead, his lips curled into a small, unsettling smile, revealing darkened, uneven teeth. My skin prickled. Quickly closed the blinds, trying to shake off the creeping chill that had settled over me. That was the first night I heard him. I had just started drifting off to sleep when a faint tapping echoed through my apartment. My eyes snapped open, heart hammering. The tapping was steady, deliberate, like someone lightly rapping their knuckles against glass. I lay frozen, listening, trying to place the sound. Tap, tap, tap. It was coming from my window. Slowly, dreading what I might see, turned toward it. Through the thin fabric of my blinds, I could make out a shadowy outline standing on the fire escape outside my apartment. A face pressed close to the glass, a wide toothy smile just barely visible through the slats. My blood ran cold. I wanted to scream, but I was paralyzed. Squeezed my eyes shut, hoping it was just my imagination, that the man in the window was only a trick of the light. A shadow cast by passing cars. The tapping grew louder, more insistent. Tap, tap, tap. Somehow, I managed to bolt upright, grabbing my phone and dialing 911 with trembling fingers. The dispatcher answered, her voice a steady anchor in the dark. I whispered, terrified he might hear me, that there was someone on my fire escape. Within minutes, I heard the wail of sirens. I didn't dare open my eyes until I felt the reassuring presence of the police officers. They searched the fire escape, the alley, and the entire building, but found nothing. No footprints, no fingerprints, nothing to indicate anyone had been there at all. The officers suggested it was just a nightmare. Figment of my imagination. But I knew what I'd seen. I could still feel the weight of his gaze, the pressure of his face pressing against my window. That night, I barely slept, the man's smile haunting my every thought. The next day, I tried to convince myself it was over, that he wouldn't return. But as the clock struck 10, I found myself unable to resist looking out the window. He was there, staring back at me from across the street. This time, he looked different. His face was somehow clearer, his features sharper, more defined. His eyes were glassy and dull. His skin was pale and stretched tight over his bones. And there was something else. He was holding up a piece of paper against the glass. It was a small yellowed scrap, crinkled around the edges. I squinted, trying to read the faint, scrawled words. "I'm watching." I stumbled back, heart racing. But when I looked again, the note was gone. The man was gone, almost like he never existed. The window across the street was empty. For days, I waited, dreading the hour of 10 o'clock. The silence gnawed at me, filling my mind with dread. But after a week, when he didn't reappear, I began to hope that maybe it was over. One night, weeks later, I was drifting off to sleep when a loud knock jolted me awake. I froze, straining my ears, praying I'd imagined it. Knock, knock, knock. The sound was coming from my front door. My heart raced as I forced myself to get up, creeping slowly toward the door. As I got closer, I could hear something, a faint, rasping whisper, barely audible through the thick wood. "Let me in." The whisper was dry, hollow, like dead leaves scraping against pavement. I backed away, shaking. I turned on every light in my apartment, trying to drown out the darkness, the growing terror that filled me. The knocking continued, steady, rhythmic, and unyielding. "Let me in." Desperate, I dialed the police again, but by the time they arrived, the knocking had stopped. The officers looked at me with pity, clearly doubting my story. They left soon after, telling me to call if I had any more trouble. For hours, I sat in silence, barely breathing, waiting for the knocking to start again. But it didn't. I never heard it again. A few days later, I noticed the building across the street was empty. No lights, no movement. It was as though the place had been abandoned. Curious, and maybe a little desperate for closure. I went over to ask around, hoping to learn something about the man in the window. The landlord, an elderly woman, looked at me with wide eyes when I mentioned him. "No one's lived there for months," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "The last tenant, well, he disappeared. The police never found him. The only thing they found in the apartment was a note left on his window. It said, 'I'm watching.'" Her words chilled me to the core. That night, as I lay in bed, I realized something. I could still feel his eyes on me, watching from somewhere unseen, waiting for the moment I'd let him in. My daughter's imaginary friend keeps predicting tragedies. It started with a simple question. "Mommy, can imaginary friends be real?" I glanced up from my laptop. My 7-year-old daughter, Lily, stood in the doorway of my home office, clutching her stuffed bunny. I smiled. "Of course not, sweetheart. That's why they're called imaginary." Her lips pursed. "But what if they know things?" I frowned. "What kind of things?" Lily shrugged, her gaze darting away. "Just stuff. Never mind." She shuffled out before I could press further. At the time, I didn't think much of it. Kids have wild imaginations, right? But then, the accidents started happening. The first time, it was a fire at our neighbor's house. The night before, Lily came to me looking pale. "Mommy, Olivia says Mrs. Carter's house is going to burn down." I paused mid-sip of my coffee. "Who's Olivia?" "My friend," Lily said simply, as if that explained everything. "She's your imaginary friend?" I asked, smiling. Lily hesitated, then nodded. "She doesn't like being called imaginary." "Right," I said, humoring her. "Why does Olivia think Mrs. Carter's house will burn down?" "She just knows," Lily said. "She knows lots of stuff." I reassured Lily it was just her imagination. But the next morning, sirens blared down our street. Flames consumed the Carter house. Black smoke billowed into the sky. Luckily, Mrs. Carter was unharmed. She'd gone out for groceries minutes before the fire started. When Lily heard, she didn't seem surprised. "I told you," she whispered. 2 weeks later, Lily mentioned Olivia again. "Mommy, Olivia says to stay away from the bridge tomorrow." I froze. "Why?" "She says it's going to fall." My stomach nodded. The bridge was part of my daily commute. "Lily, that's not funny." "I'm not joking," she said earnestly. "Please don't go." Against my better judgment, I worked from home the next day. Around noon, I got a news alert. "Massive bridge collapse leaves 5 dead, dozens injured." I stared at my phone, a cold sweat breaking out across my skin. The bridge Lily warned me about had collapsed during the morning rush hour. If I'd ignored her, I might have been on it. When I confronted her, she just shrugged. "Olivia told me." "Who's Olivia?" I demanded. "She's my friend," Lily said, her voice trembling. "She says terrible things are going to keep happening." From then on, Olivia's predictions became a regular occurrence. A car crash at an intersection. A storm that uprooted trees. A freak accident at the grocery store. Every time, Lily would relay Olivia's warnings, and every time, I brushed them off until they came true. Tried everything to understand. Was Lily hearing things, seeing something I couldn't? He even took her to a therapist, who chalked it up to coincidence and a vivid imagination, but it didn't feel like coincidence. One night, decided to push. Lily, what does Olivia look like? She's pretty, Lily said softly, but her eyes are black like the night. The hair on my arm stood up. Where does Olivia live? Asked. Lily pointed to her closet. I laughed nervously. In your closet. She doesn't live there, Lily clarified, but that's where she comes from. That night, I locked Lily's closet door. A few days ago, Lily came to me crying. Olivia says you're in danger. I felt a chill. From what? She won't say, Lily sobbed, but she's scared. The last time Olivia predicted danger, it saved my life, so I started taking precautions. I stayed home, avoided sharp objects, and double-checked every lock. Nothing happened. Then, yesterday, Lily's room went cold. I was tucking her in when she whispered, "She's here." Who's here? Olivia, Lily said, her voice shaking. She says, it's too late. The lights flickered. I spun toward the closet. The locked door creaked open, though I hadn't touched it. Mommy. Lily's voice was barely audible. Something stepped out of the shadows. I don't know how to describe it. Long limbs, skin stretched too tight, and eyes like endless voids. It wasn't human. It wasn't anything I could explain. Leave her alone, I screamed, throwing myself in front of Lily. The thing tilted its head, as if studying me. Then, it smiled, an impossibly wide, jagged grin. You can't stop what's coming, it whispered, its voice a rasp that chilled me to the bone. And then, it was gone. Now, Lily won't speak. She just sits in her room, staring at the closet door. She won't eat, won't sleep, and flinches whenever I get too close. The worst part? I've started hearing things, soft whispers at night, scratching from inside the walls. Last night, I woke up to find Lily standing over me, her eyes unfocused. Olivia says it's your turn, she whispered. I don't know what's happening, but I'm scared. Whatever Olivia is, she's not imaginary. She's real, and she's not done with us. A few days ago, Lily came to me crying. Olivia says you're in danger. I felt a chill. From what? She won't say, Lily sobbed, but she's scared. The last time Olivia predicted danger, it saved my life, so I started taking precautions. I stayed home, avoided sharp objects, and double-checked every lock. Nothing happened. Then, yesterday, Lily's room went cold. I was tucking her in when she whispered, she's here. Who's here? Olivia, Lily said, her voice shaking. She says, it's too late. The lights flickered. I spun toward the closet. The locked door creaked open, though I hadn't touched it. Mommy. Lily's voice was barely audible. Something stepped out of the shadows. I don't know how to describe it. Long limbs, skin stretched too tight, and eyes like endless voids. It wasn't human. It wasn't anything I could explain. Leave her alone, I screamed, throwing myself in front of Lily. The thing tilted its head, as if studying me. Then it smiled, an impossibly wide, jagged grin. You can't stop what's coming, it whispered, its voice a rasp that chilled me to the bone. And then, it was gone. Now, Lily won't speak. She just sits in her room, staring at the closet door. She won't eat, won't sleep, and flinches whenever I get too close. The worst part? I've started hearing things, soft whispers at night, scratching from inside the walls. Last night, I woke up to find Lily standing over me, her eyes unfocused. "Olivia says it's your turn," she whispered. "I don't know what's happening, but I'm scared. Whatever Olivia is, she's not imaginary. She's real, and she's not done with us." My wife cries at 11 p.m. every night. The only word that I can think of that describes how I feel is inadequate. I've always wanted to do more for my wife, but she's always assured me over and over that things are fine, and that she just needs the time and space to process them. Yet night after night, the routine has been the same. Just before 11 p.m., as if driven by some unseen force, Ellen rises, quietly excuses herself, and disappears into the bathroom. The door clicks shut, and the locking of the door is followed by muffled sounds of her crying. Not super loud, but loud enough to be the only sound I hear once she starts. I often find myself thinking about our life together. When did this start? Did I do something? Did I miss something when we first started dating? I tend to then replay our entire relationship in my head, looking for signs I might have missed while I wait for her to come out of the bathroom. We met during our junior year of college. Our first run-in was at one of those cliché frat parties, an event called Jerseys and Jorts. And as you guessed it, every guy and girl there was sporting some sort of sports jersey and a pair of cut-off jeans. Our eyes met while we were both waiting in an obnoxiously loud line for a drink. She was stunning. Then, after I probably stared a little too long, she said hello and introduced herself. Ellen Callis. She complimented my Mutombo Nuggets jersey, an old vintage jersey imbued with a rainbow of vibrant colors. I complimented her retro Robinson USA jersey, a bona fide classic. She had borrowed it from her roommate. Couple of minutes into our conversation, I realized she didn't know who either Dikembe Mutombo or David Robinson were. Then we laughed at everyone in jean shorts and how everyone would secretly look forward to somehow coming up with a new excuse or themed party where they could sport their jean shorts again. Why can't people just admit they like wearing jean shorts? We continued poking fun at Greek life at schools, and somehow ended up talking about our classes and our majors, then our roommates. It felt like we talked the entire night. I was in love. We followed each other on Instagram. It took me 3 weeks of barraging her with memes, which she often hearted, before she responded with a fateful message. DOWUDONTTOGETCOFFE. ITHME. Thought I was dreaming. One morning later that week, we were in line at Picasso's Coffee. I was babbling about how much I love cold brew. When we were finally up, she ordered tea. I was so caught off guard by her order that I somehow ended up ordering a berry blast smoothie. Thought had infiltrated my mind. I guess, what if she didn't like coffee drinkers? When we finally sat down with our drinks, she laughed and pointed out that neither of us got a coffee, and that maybe it was a sign we would have to go again sometime soon. I officially asked Ellen to be my girlfriend at the art museum one morning while we were finally sipping coffees. We were standing opposite Van Gogh's painting, The Ravine. It was her favorite painting in the museum. She loved talking about it. Not only is it one of his masterpieces, but underneath, there's a totally different painting, maybe another masterpiece. He struggled to pick which image he wanted to present to the viewer. I loved the way she looked at that painting. She's always been so much wiser than me. Then time flew by. At times, the years feel like a single memory. Ellen and I have been married 3 years, and we have a beautiful 8-month-old daughter named Zoe. I like to think we're the picture of a joyful family. Weekend trips to the park, family dinners, and bedtime stories every night. Ellen has been everything I ever wanted in a partner, loving, supportive, and devoted to our family. I think we've been in love since our first coffee date, and having Zoe has only strengthened our relationship. But this peculiar trait of hers has always weighed on me, and it's something I still, After everything, can't make sense of. Every night at 11 p.m., Ellen is in a locked bathroom and crying. When she returns, her eyes are red and puffy, but she smiles and insists everything is fine. The truth is I can't quite remember exactly when it started, but I'm almost sure I first noticed it a couple weeks after we moved into the new house. Looking back, maybe it did start around then. It was a lot of change quickly. In 1 year, we got engaged and then married. I lost my job, and it took longer to find a new one than we expected. Ellen lost her mom to breast cancer, and then we found out we had a baby on the way. I figured this was Ellen's way of coping. Grief, stress, an enormous change. I tried to give her space, hoping she'd tell me when she was ready. "Ellen, are you okay?" asked her as she slowly climbed into bed one night. The crying had been more intense than usual. She looked as if she was hiding physical pain. She responded with a gentle smile, her eyes still glistening from the remnants of tears she hadn't fully wiped away. "I'm okay, really. Just thinking about things," she finally said. "What kind of things?" "Press gently." She waved it off, gave me a quick kiss on the cheek, and changed the subject. I let it drop, thinking it was just a rough patch. We all have those, right? But as time went on, I realized it wasn't just a phase. It was something much deeper, something that didn't fade. Her 11 p.m. ritual continued. No matter where we were, on vacation, at a friend's house, even out at dinner on a date night, at 11 p.m., she'd find a bathroom, go in alone, and cry. One day, I hoped that Ellen would bring it up to me in bed. That one topic that your partner finally feels safe enough to share with you just as you are both about to doze off. Some strong mixture of sleepy comfort and courage. I was ready for any explanation, but I realize now I'll never know. "I'm sorry. I read back what I've written and haven't made it clear. I guess in some ways, Ellen is still here with Zoe and me. We lost Ellen in a car accident recently. On July 5th, just before dawn, Ellen got up early one morning to go meet her dad at the harbor for a mile swim. It was a tradition of theirs, always the morning after the 4th. They joked that their time in the water calmed down the fish, who were spooked by all of the fireworks from the night before. But she never made it to the pier. She was hit by a drunk driver who was just coming home from the bars. So it's me and Zoe now. And our families. Even though they work, my parents have helped out as much as possible. Ellen's dad tried his best for a while. But I think the grief of losing both his wife and daughter was too much. Just a few weeks after Ellen's funeral, he abruptly said he needed to go to Greece to visit family. I honestly didn't even know they had family in Greece. Ellen nor anyone in her family ever mentioned them. I look back now and wish I had asked Ellen's dad about it after I first noticed. Had they ever noticed it when Ellen lived at home? Or maybe I should have pushed further with Ellen herself to get an answer. I could have mentioned therapy. I could have gone with her, and we could have figured it out together. But now I find myself in the same position, unable to help someone I love. The night Ellen died, after the hospital, after sitting for hours in that cold, fluorescent waiting room, I finally came home with Zoe. My mom and dad stayed over with us. Just a baby, too young to understand what had happened. But that night, only more questions came. When I put Zoe to bed, she started crying. It was loud and heart-wrenching, nothing like the soft cries of a sleepy baby. I held her, soothing her as best I could until she finally calmed down. It wasn't until after she'd fallen asleep in my arms that I glanced at the clock. It was just a few minutes after 11 p.m. My stomach dropped. Hoped it was maybe just a coincidence. Though as the days and nights passed, it was clear. Every night at 11 p.m. on the dot, Zoe cries a horrible cry. Her body writhes, as if she's in some severe pain. I can't do anything for her. I hold her tightly in my arms and just let her cry out. Sometimes, when Zoe starts crying, the room seems to grow colder, like a sudden drop in temperature that chills my skin and my bones. The air itself feels heavy, as if something unseen is pressing down on us. But it's not like this every time. Sometimes it seems to do the opposite. The room gets warmer and lighter. I know I probably sound crazy. It's been like this longer than I'd ever care to admit. Just haven't known what to do. Feeling hopeless, I finally confided in my parents about Zoe's nightly crying. At first, they thought I was just overwhelmed with grief, imagining things. In their defense, I couldn't bring myself to explain that Ellen did the same thing. It's like I was embarrassed to admit it. Not embarrassed of Ellen, but embarrassed I didn't do more to help. My parents did say that no matter what was going on, I should get Zoe looked at if she was crying terribly all the time. I first took her to our regular pediatrician. Dr. Connolly performed a comprehensive physical exam, checking Zoe's vitals, growth metrics, and reflexes, but nothing appeared out of the ordinary. After a thorough discussion of her symptoms, Dr. Connolly suggested we rule out any underlying sleep disorders, such as parasomnia or night terrors. However, when initial polysomnography tests came back normal, he referred us to a pediatric neurologist for further evaluation, suspecting a possible neurological component. After a week of waiting, a neurologist named Dr. Patel conducted a full neurological examination, assessing Zoe's cranial nerve function, motor coordination, and sensory responses. She ordered an electroencephalogram, an EEG, she called it, to monitor for abnormal electrical brain activity, looking for signs of nocturnal epilepsy or other seizure disorders. When the EEG results returned unremarkable, Dr. Patel recommended advanced neuroimaging, including an MRI and a PET scan, to investigate any structural or metabolic abnormalities in Zoe's brain. The scans, however, showed no signs of lesions, tumors, or any abnormalities in her cerebral cortex or limbic system, leaving Dr. Patel as perplexed as I was. Despite the extensive battery of tests, everything pointed to a perfectly healthy child, yet the unexplained crying persisted like clockwork. After several visits and countless tests, the doctors couldn't find anything physically wrong with her. Zoe was perfectly healthy. In the end, Dr. Patel offered one suggestion, an explanation that was almost impossible to test: her body reacting to something that wasn't physically there, but perhaps emotionally imprinted. It was the only explanation she could offer, though it left me with more questions than answers. Last week, while I was holding Zoe tightly as she let out a long, drawn-out wail, starting with a high-pitched scream, a possible path forward came to me. I knew hearing it was the only way I could get help, so I grabbed my phone and started recording. I did this for 3 nights in a row. Then I drafted an email with the recordings to Dr. Patel's office with a simple note: PLEASE. ISTNTOTHESE. I sent them over Friday morning. Today, my mom came over and watched Zoe for me while I caught up on work from last week. Around 3 p.m., my mom barreled into my office, my phone in her hand. Dr. Patel was calling. Shot up from my desk, grabbed my phone, and answered. Dr. Patel explained that she'd been listening to the recordings of Zoe crying all weekend and is astonished that a child could generate such a loud, agonizing cry. Did you edit these? She finally asked me. Of course not, I answered. From an infant? No, from any person. I have never heard anything like this my entire life, she continued. She went silent for a while, then asked me if we could come in for more tests tomorrow night. From 10 p.m. to midnight, Dr. Patel wants to take new scans during an actual crying episode. Yes, thank you so much. I nearly yelled back on the phone when she asked my thoughts on the plan. It's 10:44 p.m. now. I am going to get ready to hold Zoe in my arms and tell her again and again that it will be over soon. that she doesn't need to cry. Even though I know deep down, I don't know if I can help her. I hope the tests tomorrow night bring answers. I encountered something while sleeping in an abandoned building. When I was 14, I was kicked out of my house by my parents. I don't feel like explaining what led up to the fight that ended our relationship. Jumped around between different friends' places until I ran out of friends. I knew unless I contacted my family, I would end up on the street at some point. Still being stubborn, I refused. When my last friend said I couldn't stay the night, I was alone with nowhere to go and only a few bucks in my pocket. The other issue was it got unseasonably cold. Before night fell, I could already see my breath. By some luck, I found a rundown building I could break into and stay out of the wind. I ran through any ideas of what to do in my head. If I could stand being outside for a night, I can go to school tomorrow. I didn't really do work in class, but at least I could stay warm and take scraps of people's lunches no one wanted. It was how I normally got food during the day. The gas station offered free hot water. If I could scrape together enough change, an instant noodle bowl for dinner would warm me up. Without anything else to do, I curled up on the ground using my backpack as a pillow to sleep. That strategy of using the school for heat and bits of food worked for a few days. I could use the showers there, and a friend let me come over to his place to wash my few pieces of clothing. His parents were strict about who came over, so I was out of the house before they got home, and that meant staying over wasn't an option. At least he was nice enough to endure his parents' wrath if we got caught, so I would have some clean underwear. Overall, the kids at my school were pretty nice, or maybe that was just the ones I hung around with. We all had terrible home lives in some way, so we all banded together to help out if we could. None of us could do anything about our home life, but we could make sure our friends were fed. They begged me to just go back home. I refused, thinking I was doing all right. They were my support system, and the old, broken-down building wasn't that bad, until I could find something better. My friends kept bringing up valid points about other people on the street seeing me as an easy target. I could be robbed, murdered, or sold into trafficking, and no one would be able to help. Being on the street as a kid was dangerous in too many ways to count. And yet, I still didn't go back home. The problem came when the temperature dropped below freezing. Another friend gave me a jacket that was too small for him. Some gave me extra pairs of socks, and another found some old mittens he wasn't using. And yet, it wasn't enough. As I found my way to the old building to get settled in for the night, I wondered if I would be able to make it. The sun hadn't set yet, and I was shivering. Wore all the clothing I owned. I placed the small jacket on the ground because I heard it was warmer to sleep on something. Terrible wind blew outside as I curled up in my layers of clothing, wondering what to do. There were some places I could hang out. The issue was other people knew about those places. I've come across some pretty threatening people in the same situation as myself. I almost felt bad about being uncomfortable around those people because they had issues they couldn't control. But I also knew if I tried hanging out inside the warmer places with the other homeless population, I would have issues with them. There was also a chance that someone actually cared about a kid being on the street and called the cops. As I shivered, I stayed where I was, thinking freezing would be better than getting stabbed for my shoes, or be forced to go back home. I could see every puff of breath. My nose hurt from how cold it was, and my fingers and toes refused to warm up. I thought about why I was sleeping on the cold ground, and my chest tightened. I was frustrated at my parents for creating a home in which I felt so unwelcome. It was as if dying from hypothermia was better than being with them. I tried being a good kid but gave up when nothing I did mattered to them. If they punished me for nothing, I might as well do whatever I wanted, and this is where I ended up. My body hurt from shaking, and yet I couldn't stop. Even if I wanted to call the cops on myself just to be somewhere warm, I was too weak to get up from only an hour on the hard ground. I suppose it wasn't just that hour. It was a week of sleeping outside and not getting regular meals. Before then, I wasn't aware of how painful the cold could be. My chest hurt from shaking, my lungs hurt from the cold air, and my toes felt as if they were going to fall off. I wanted nothing more than a hot meal and a warm bed. Tears started to form, but I forced them down, knowing the wetness on my face would just make me feel colder. Just as I was nodding off, convinced I wouldn't wake up again, I heard something echo through the dark, cold building. A tapping sound. I searched my brain to figure out where I had heard the sound before. It kept getting closer. It was so dark. Couldn't see what was causing the sound, and I was too weak to even sit up. I felt scared to death, and yet my eyes refused to open as the sound got closer and closer. Suddenly, I felt a puff of hot wind on my face. Something in my brain clicked as I realized the sounds I heard getting closer were similar to dog claws tapping on a rough surface. I wanted to open my eyes to see what kind of beasts were in front of me, but my body simply shut down. I passed out completely defenseless. I woke up a short while later feeling as if I couldn't breathe. Something was crushing down in me. An odd smell came as my eyes fluttered open, but I couldn't see anything through the darkness. And for some reason, I was warm, almost hot. Struggled to get my arm free that was pinned under my body. When it moved, I felt something rough. Fur-like texture surrounded me. Then, I realized some animal was sitting on me, or curled around my small form. I didn't know about any wild animals that would be this big. Panic started to rise. If it was a bear, or a big cat that escaped from the zoo, or a private collector, I was toast. Once it woke up, I would be mauled when it realized I was a tasty treat. But why did it curl itself around me in the first place? Was it also cold and just using me for body heat? I was still weak and tired. The pressure behind my eyes was a sign of an illness. Soon drifted back asleep while listening to the rhythmic breathing of the creature holding me hostage. When I woke up again, the cold overtook my body again. My face was flushed and my throat was sore. I couldn't sit up without getting so lightheaded. I needed to sit back down. Harsh coughs racked my chest. That was a problem. Aside from being sick and still in the harsh weather, it was dangerous being loud while alone. I'd been silent the entire time I stayed in the building. This time I hoped a security guard found me. At least then I might get some treatment before getting shipped back home. I couldn't move that day. Fever chills shook my body down to the bones. I had some water but couldn't even keep that down. If I could only move and find a payphone to call for help. And yet, I was too ill to do anything. As I lay on the floor drifting in and out of sleep for the day, I noticed something in the cement that hadn't been there before. Deep grooves in the floor in front of where I was. Almost like massive claw marks. As the sun fell with the temperature, I heard the tapping sound again. I was too scared to keep my eyes open, even though I was awake. Pretending to be asleep, the creature from the night before roughly curled around my sick body. I could only tell it was huge and had dark, long fur. No animal I knew of would fit the description. Maybe I was hallucinating because of my fever. It was scary as hell, but at least I was warm. Again, by the time I woke up, the mystery creature was gone, leaving more claw marks. I was feeling well enough to move and got packed as fast as my body would move in the dawn light. That was when I was finally discovered. A pair of men dressed in layers of rags came through the same broken door I'd found. They hadn't made a move just yet. They watched, trying to decide what to do based on my actions. They either just wanted my spot or wanted something of me I couldn't give up. I looked around trying to find another way to escape. I figured this building was meant to be an office that was never finished. I was on the second floor. Each window was broken or not installed. Jumping might not kill me. The only way down the stairs was to pass the two poorly hidden men. I got ready to make a break for the window as they rushed out first. Only got a few steps when I felt someone grab my backpack to bring me to the ground. I screamed, trying to get their hands off as they pulled at my clothing, trying to get anything they could. A knife glittered in the dim sunlight, and yet I still fought, trying to get free. Both of them reeked. A mixture of the smell and still being ill made me gag between screams. Neither was well fed, but they could easily overpower a kid still in high school. I was going to die, or worse. I should have if it wasn't for what kept me warm the past 2 nights. Out of nowhere, the man who was holding the knife suddenly didn't have his head. Blood sprouted from the wound, causing me and my attacker to stop to stare wide-eyed in fear. The body hit the ground with a sickening sound. The other man scrambled back, trying to figure out what just happened and where the attack came from. I was frozen to the spot from fear and shock as blood pooled on the ground next to my head. A scream made me finally sit up. Dark creature, almost in the shape of a wolf, appeared in the room. It nearly reached the ceiling, and if it raised its head, it wouldn't fit. I couldn't see any eyes or even any facial features on the head. The fur so dark it was as if all color and light were being sucked inside. The man screaming drew the beast's attention. The turn of the featureless head toward the sound nearly made me faint with fear. Instead of finishing off the other person quickly like the first, it took its time. First a slash across his face with a flick of a single claw, then another over his chest. The man tried running but was blocked at every attempt. More and more wounds were dealt, spattering blood across the room. The monster finally gave some sort of mercy, pinning its prey down with one massive clawed paw and tearing into his stomach with a large mouth that appeared between dark fur. The sounds of it crunching through bones and tearing out organs made me sick. I puked out bile, unable to stop. Some voice in the back of my head told me I needed to get the hell out of there while it was distracted. It saved my life twice, maybe 3 times. I didn't freeze or was murdered by these two, but I didn't feel as if this monster was on my side, but rather it used me. I was a lure. Being weak, I would draw in men like these two. Why eat one meal when you could use it to bring in more? If it decided I wasn't good enough bait, I would be dinner. With the door blocked, I did the only other thing I could think of. I grabbed my backpack and took a running jump out the window. I was right. It didn't kill me, but it did break a few things. I got up and hobbled to a nearby gas station, still in so much shock I wasn't fully aware of how badly I was hurt. The attendant called for an ambulance before I collapsed. Tried telling them about the creature and the 2 dead men. The cops found no signs of someone being killed in the building. Only the scratch marks on the ground and the jacket I left behind. They assumed I saw the marks and had a fever dream so vivid it made me jump out the window. My parents got in trouble for the fact that I was sleeping on the streets, and yet not even the school knew. My friend should have said something, but they heard so many horror stories about foster care they didn't want to report my situation. In the end, I moved in with my aunt. It wasn't perfect, but she was much better than my parents, who I still barely speak with. To this day, I don't know what I came across. Almost want to thank it for keeping me alive. After that experience, I gotta say I appreciate my bed the most, even though now it is being taken up by my aunt's 2 large dogs most nights, making it nearly impossible to sleep. Loser leap. I never believed in ghosts. Nothing could stay hidden for that long. And I mean, how could one not have been recorded by now? By someone credible. Or on better recording equipment than a cell phone from 2010. So, Loser's Leap didn't creep me out. Even though everyone claimed it was haunted and dangerous, there wasn't an actual reason to think that. I'm from Sherman, Vermont, a ghost town about 45 minutes out from Montpelier. You've probably never heard of it. You could drive through the entire town in 10 minutes. We had a humble population of about 4,000, and not a single notable thing to draw in tourists. The only aspect of Sherman you might have heard about is Loser's Leap. On the surface, it wasn't much to talk about, just a tall hill in the woods, overlooking the White River. It was pretty steep, about 100 feet over the river, with a scenic waterfall off to the west, not too close to being disruptively loud, but not too far to be unnoticed. It was a nice place to go picnicking, bring a date, hell, maybe even propose, except for one thing: the suicides. Ever since the 1600s, Loser's Leap was infamous for the mysterious number of suicides that took place there. It all started during colonial expansion when a large group of Abenaki Indians jumped off the hilltop into the river, instead of being forced out of their homeland. The story goes that since then, it's been cursed. No one really knows if that actually happened or not, and the same goes for some of the other older suicide tales. But indisputably, in October of 1970, a boy by the name of Ricardo Elias was found dead at the base of the river. He was a draft dodger on his unholy pilgrimage to Canada, who got cornered by police less than 100 miles from the border. Came all the way from Florida too, feeling like his only options left were prison. Or even worse, the war in Vietnam. He found himself at Loser's Leap, where he took the plunge. Then, again, in 1986, a boy named Mike Merkel ended it all on the same fateful hilltop. There's not a lot known about his story. More or less, he was a loner who was tired of his life. And then, in 2008, just about 10 years ago, a girl jumped too. Though her body was never found, she was known for visiting the Leap a lot, and it was the last place she was heading before her disappearance. Needless to say, the uncanny number of suicides that took place there made it a hot spot for ghost stories and paranormal rumors. The idea was that people with no hope left, completely out of options, losers, came there to kiss this cruel world goodbye, but their spirits became tethered to the place and would push you off the ledge if you got too close. But like I said, I never believed in ghosts. In fact, the reputation the place had benefited me greatly, because I could come out there all by myself with no threat of having to deal with anybody else. I came out there all the time to sit in the grass, listen to the waterfall, and write. Whether it be poems, stories, personal prose, it didn't matter. When I was there, I always had something to write. And it wasn't like I had anything better to do. I worked at a grocery store called Shaw's, but since most of the employees were breadwinners, they got most of the hours. I was lucky to work 3 shifts a week. Both my parents worked all day and weren't the most congenial when they were around. And my only friend was Alien, if you could even call her that. Alien and I had been friends ever since we were in preschool. She had light brown hair and these big green eyes. Her parents worked a lot, like mine, and so we were always left at aftercare together after school. We were typically the last 2 kids to get picked up. Naturally, we became pretty good friends. Back then, and until around 6th grade, both of us were ignored by everybody else. We had the same classmates every year because there were only 3 schools in town: a preschool, an elementary through middle school, and high school. There were 26 of us back then, and with the loss of 2 students who moved away, and the addition of 1 student who moved to Sherman from 1 county over, the group stayed the exact same throughout every year. Alien and I were typically regarded as weird, and so we were left alone. But when 6th grade hit, the wonderful process that is puberty took place, and Alien got hot. To me, she was always pretty, but the breasts and makeup sold everybody else on it. And sure enough, as is the natural order of things, when she became hot, I was ignored. The dynamic duo was no more. At least beneath the surface. We still talked a lot, and she'd hang out with me on occasion. But the friendship we used to have, that was gone. She was assimilated into the popular crowd and became more and more like them every year until we really didn't have anything in common anymore. Typically, talking was her venting to me about Scott, the douchebag I mentioned who moved into Sherman our junior year. He was attractive and new, and thus became the target of all the girls who were sick of the same old, same old. All Aliane wanted these days was to get Scott's attention, and that was about the only thing that crossed her mind. I think. At least, that's all she cared to tell me about. So, in my lonesomeness, my writing habit became more and more pervasive, and though I had the house to myself most of the time, I didn't like the vibe there. Being at home reminded me of getting snaps from Aliane whining about Scott not looking at her enough across the bonfire in Gage's backyard, and hearing my parents argue. It was hard to find inspiration there. And so on my 17th birthday, which I spent alone because Aliane was busy at a party, I decided the only place in town I hadn't seen a trillion times was Loser's Leap. Not believing in ghosts made it pretty easy to convince myself to visit. It was about a 20-minute drive from my house, and then a 20-minute walk from the parking grounds. You lost reception about a minute after walking into the woods, and that's the best part. Absolutely no distractions, no predictable messages from Aliane, no glaring at my phone and wishing I'd get a notification, because I knew none of them were coming out there. It became my favorite place in town, and before long, I was going out there just about every afternoon. I wasn't working, where I'd sit in the grass against a tree and write. But my routine of resting there and enjoying nature in my lonesomeness eventually came to an end. I remember that day like it was yesterday. It was a warm Vermont day in late April, around 60 degrees, and I'd just gotten out of my 7th period class, statistics. Was a senior with only a month and a half of school left, and with my classes mostly finished, I didn't have much homework to juggle with writing anymore. I climbed into my car, a red 2001 Honda Accord. It was ugly and nothing to brag about, but I bought it in full, and it got me where I needed to go, just as I shut the car door, and my phone vibrated softly. Looked down and saw exactly what I knew was coming. A snap from Aliane. I opened it dully. He's talking to Abby again. Aw, sorry. Why Abby? Seriously. I don't know. She sent something back, but I didn't care to look at it. I looked into the rearview mirror, meeting my blue eyes in the reflection, my short brown hair underneath a blue beanie. No one was behind me, so I backed out slowly. I felt my phone vibrate again, then again. I drove to the stop sign, then opened the messages. She's not even pretty, like it all. Sam. Allie, I'm driving. Oh. I put the phone down, then progressed through the stop sign, cringing at how dull she was. Sometimes I couldn't help but think about when we were kids, how much fun we used to have. She was honestly a completely different person. That Aliane was gone, most likely forever. Sometimes I felt like the only reason I even still talked to her was because I had literally no one else to talk to, and she was preferable to nothing. My car didn't have Bluetooth or even a working auxiliary port, and the radio stations in town sucked, so I listened to CDs. I put in the White Album, my favorite Beatles album that I listened to enough to drive Aliane crazy, and drove up the winding road toward Loser's Leap. The drive was peaceful, as usual. The trees were just getting their leaves back, and the forest was becoming alive again. The snow was gone, and the animals were coming back out, allowing the sight of an occasional wood thrush fluttering by, or a squirrel rummaging for food. When I got to the parking grounds, I left my phone in the car per usual, as taking it into the woods was pointless anyway, and began my trek through the woods to the leap. I wore a maroon windbreaker, blue jeans, boots, and my blue beanie, my journal in my hand. At last, I stepped through the clearing, emerging into the forbidden beauty that was Loser's Leap. The sight never grew old. I sighed with relief, taking in the serene majesty of the lookout. Beyond the grassy hilltop, dotted sparingly with trees, was the river, humming gently 100 feet below. All around the river on either side was a soft dirt bank, followed by tall trees, swaying gently in the cool and nippy breeze. Round the river on all sides was mostly uncharted wilderness, with only a trail or two visible from my perch, and to the west, on my left, was the waterfall, maybe 15 feet shorter than the leap. On top of the waterfall was more forest. If I climbed the tree I usually sat beneath, I could make out the water tower of Clover, the next town over to the north. But today I leaned against the tree, taking out my journal. I thumbed through the pages, finally reaching a blank one. I withdrew a black pen from my jacket pocket, examining the page. I shut my eyes and let my soul do the talking. Scott. Why Scott? I don't get it, Allie. All you ever do is talk about Scott. What happened to us hanging out as children? Pushing each other on the swing at aftercare, biking around the town on Saturdays, and going fishing after church. It ate at me. I was jaded to her ignoring me, but once in a while, it hurt me again. Scott. What an ashhole. He doesn't care about you or Abby or anyone. And you know it too. Why do you just settle for that, Allie? I sighed and opened my journal. I stared at the empty page for a while, pressing the back of my pen into the corner of my lip, waiting for some divine inspiration to come. But it never did. That was fine. Sometimes it didn't. I resigned myself to just taking in the beauty of the leap again. And that's when something completely unforeseeable happened. For the first time ever, having frequented this place ever since my 17th birthday, I heard someone coming through the trees. My heart froze and I jumped up, startled by the sound. And then, my mind was blown even more. A girl came stepping out of the tree line, with long, flowing blonde hair that glowed in the sunlight, and vibrant turquoise eyes, an intoxicating swirl of sky blue and seafoam green. On her face was a slight spattering of pale freckles, and she had sharp, fox-like features. She wore a red and white flannel shirt, unbuttoned over the top of her chest, and underneath she wore a white tank top. She wore skinny jeans as well. She gasped, startled to see me. "Ah. Hey." I waved speechlessly. "Hi." She waved back, starting to smile. Sorry. I didn't mean to intrude on you." "No, you're fine," I smiled back. "Wow, I've literally never seen another person up here before." "Yeah, me neither," she laughed. I was confused by that, because I came up here all the time, and if she came out here with any relative frequency, I'd have had to have seen her by now. But I knew it would only make me sound creepy to point that out. "So what brings you up here?" "Oh, and, I'm Sam." "Liam," she smiled congenially. "And honestly, I just come out here to sing and play because I know it's a private place and no one's listening." I hadn't even noticed the guitar case in her hand. "Oh, cool. Sorry if I'm ruining your privacy." I scratched the back of my head, but she replied, "No, you're not. Not at all. I mean, I'm still just shocked to see someone here. Sorry if this is weird, but like, how often do you come out here? Because I come out here more often than I'd like to admit, and I've never seen you." I chuckled. "I mean, I don't come out here all the time," she admitted. "Probably once or twice a month. But still, I was pretty sure I was the only person that wasn't too afraid to visit this place." "Nah. I don't believe in ghosts," I shrugged. "Me neither," she laughed dryly. What shocked me even more than seeing her here was that I'd never seen her before. She certainly couldn't be from Sherman, Unless she was homeschooled and locked in her parents' basement. Are you from Sherman? I inquired. I've never seen you around. No, I'm from Clover. Wow, that's a bit of a drive. Yeah, that's why I don't come out here more. But it's worth the drive. Sucks this place has such a bad reputation. It's gorgeous. Agreed. I nodded. Well, you mentioned you come out here a lot, but you didn't tell me why, she inquired with a curious smile. So, what's your reason for coming out to Loser's Leap? I felt awkward admitting it. I mean, just come out here to write. Write? Write what? All kinds of stuff. Stories, prose, poems. Mostly poems. Ooh, neat, she grinned excitedly, and my heart fluttered at the sight. Let me read one. Only if you play me a song first. Ah, a trade you're proposing then. She cut her eyes at me challengingly. Well, I accept your offer. I'm not that good, though, she confessed with rosy cheeks, and once again, my heart soared. Aw. I doubt that, I replied. I was kidding, though. You don't really have to. No, it's cool, she assured, walking over to a rock and sitting on it, before opening her case and pulling out a dark brown acoustic guitar. She took a deep breath. And then her fingers stroked the strings. I don't mean to sound cliché, but when she started to sing, it completely captivated me. I mean, it was unlike anything I've ever felt. Sort of just stared off into space, taking it all in, feeling the sunlight on my skin, the waterfall and river babbling soothingly in the background. I was totally lost in the moment. Her timbre was high and light, but womanly. At some parts of the song, her voice would get soft and airy, and at other parts she sang powerfully and loud. Her emotion saturated the music, giving me goosebumps. It was a hell of a performance to whip out for a total stranger. But her choice of such a brazen first impression totally paid off. I was completely dumbfounded, and couldn't hope to hide it on my face. When she finished singing, she gently ended the song with a little more guitar playing. Then she smiled at me nervously. All I could feel at that moment was limerence. Oh no, she giggled. What's with that baffled look? Was it bad? No. I shook my head insistently, still trying to process what I'd just heard. Not at all. Just, wow, it was absolutely phenomenal. Like I was in a trance. Aw, she shrank back, becoming noticeably embarrassed. No, it wasn't. What do you mean? I laughed. That was incredible, Leona. I mean, I felt like I was high or something. What was that song called? I know, by Fiona Apple. It's supposed to be for a piano, but I think it sounds all right on the guitar. All right. I was chuckling. Leona, that's literally the prettiest thing I've ever heard. Okay, she blushed. Your turn. Let's see a poem, Sam. Well, see, that's where you're lucky. With singing, you can just do it. And if it's good, anyone can tell. It can be about anything really, but if it sounds nice, it's something you can share. With good writing. I don't know, it's just different. Good poems are deep. And it's weird just sharing that, you know. Oh, I see. Not upholding your end of the deal. She clicked her tongue. Well, don't sweat it. No, I scratched my head awkwardly. Said I'd show you a poem I wrote. Well, do you want to hear this stupid poem I wrote about a sock my junior year of high school? I was trying to stay awake in class and just jotted it down. I chuckled. Wow. I play that for you, and you read me a poem about a sock, she teased. No, I laughed, embarrassed. I'm kidding, she grinned. Yeah, let's hear it, Sam. All right, Well, it's quite duly titled Sock. Silently perching atop the shelf, lucidly worn and torn, bequeaths to me a subtle help, foot comfort in the morn. Stupid, right? Oh my God, she laughed. Wow. I mean, it sounds good though. Solid meter, well-executed slant rhyme. Well, thanks, I grinned, not expecting her to look that deeply at it. And the rest of the day, all the way until sunset, we just sat around and talked. She played guitar and sang a little more, and when I warmed up to her enough, I showed her an actual poem or two. When it was almost dark, we agreed it was time to get going. So, Leona, am I going to see you again? I asked. She seemed to be thinking about it for a moment. May 5th, she winked at me. Be here. Sounds good. I smiled back, more excited than I allowed my countenance to show. And with that, we parted ways. She said there was another parking spot on the other side of the leap closer to Clover, and that's where her car was, so I didn't get to walk back with her to the parking grounds. When I got back to my car, I sat in the driver's seat. It was dark now, but the moon was high in the sky over the lush wilderness. The weather had dropped to about 40 degrees, and I turned the heat on. As Leona's face came to mind again, my heart pounded. Who was that? I was floored. Where'd she come from? I mean, wow. I can't believe that happened. Drove home listening to the country station, which I usually didn't do, but tonight I felt upbeat enough for it. When I got home, it was just past 8 o'clock. My parents weren't home yet, which was no surprise. I went into the kitchen and heated up chicken and rice. Then, I sat at the table, taking out my phone. I had a couple of messages from Alien. Did you see Scott's story? She's all over him. Did you do Doc Pinkman's homework yet? Saw. Alien, can you call? She read the message, and within 2 minutes my phone was ringing. Hey, I greeted with an enthusiasm she didn't hear much of these days. Whoa, you're cheery. Her smooth alto voice came over the phone. You won't believe this. You will not believe this, Allie. What? What? She sounded annoyed by my high-strung tone. I went up to Loser's Leap today, like usual, but for the first time ever, I ran into somebody up there. Was it a ghost? No, it was a girl. Gorgeous girl. A girl. You met a girl up at Loser's Leap. Yeah, her name was Leona. I plugged in my headphones, then sat down, cutting through the chicken breast with my fork. Allie, she was the prettiest girl I've ever seen in my entire life. Wavy blonde hair, these glowing turquoise eyes, and she could sing. Allie was quiet for a moment. Kinda weird you met her up there. Well, yeah. I mean, I've never met anyone there before. I already said that. But that's not the point. I did meet her. You think she's up to something. I don't know why else she'd be up there. I rolled my eyes. No. She was up there to play a guitar by herself, just like I go up there to write by myself. I go up there a lot, and I'm not up to something. But you said she was hot, right? Well, guess yeah. So I mean, like, not to sound rude, but you going up there makes sense. But why would she? If she's so hot, like you say. What the hell is that supposed to mean? Come on, you know what I mean, Sam. That it makes sense for a loser like me to sit out there alone, but not someone that's attractive. Okay, don't make it sound like that. How else did you mean it? Look, just chill, okay? She got excited. Sam, all I meant was you're not necessarily Mr. Popular. You've told me word for word you go up there a lot because you have nothing better to do. Well, if she's from around here, and pretty, I'm sure she's driving all the boys crazy. She probably has a lot else to do. So why is she up on loser's leap? Where the loners go just doesn't add up. She went up there to play guitar. She wanted a place to be alone, to practice. It isn't complicated. I guess. I sat there for a moment. Why couldn't she just be happy for me? Every single time I talked to her, all she did was argue with me or make me sound dumb. I mean, what was even the point of speaking to her? Never felt fulfilled or happy. Never felt like I was talking to a friend. After spending just one afternoon with Leona, I already felt closer to her than I did with Aliane in years. You know what, Allie? Think I gotta go. Ah, come on, Sam, she replied. But I responded, every time I tell you any good news, it's like you just try to downplay it and make it sound stupid. Well, it sucks you can't be happy for your friend when I found someone I actually enjoy talking to. She was silent for a second. You don't enjoy talking to me? I paused. No, not really. All you ever talk about is Scott. I'm tired of it. Already told you, Scott is a douchebag that doesn't deserve the unconditional kindness you give him. But you never listen. You let him walk all over you, again and again and again, and then come crying to me like it's the first time it happened. All you ever have to say is Scott this and Scott that. I don't care about Scott. I don't want to hear about Scott. If I wanted to know that much about Scott, I'd talk to him. You and I haven't had one real conversation since 6th grade. To my shock, I thought I could hear her sniffling. Oh, well, if that's how you feel, then I guess I gotta go too. Come on, Allie. Don't make it out like this is my fault. Whatever, Sam. Glad you found somebody you like talking to. She hung up on me. I sat there, feeling mixed emotions. Maybe what I said was harsh. There was probably a more tactful way I could have gotten it off my chest. But then again, who was I, sitting there feeling guilty? Besides being a little rude, I didn't do anything wrong. I had every right to feel how I did. If Aliane cared about me, I sure as hell couldn't tell. She never supported me, never thanked me, never acknowledged our friendship. She treated me like her bedroom drywall, something she could vent to before walking away and shutting the lights off. And I was sick of it. I was so used to it, I didn't even realize how bad of a friend she was. But talking to Leona made me realize it. I felt happier and more alive in those couple of hours than I'd felt since I was 12 years old. And sure enough, over the next couple of days, I didn't talk with Aliane at all. Saw her around school, and we didn't really acknowledge one another. And guess what? My life was no different. In fact, it even sort of felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. I mean, don't get me wrong. I missed her by instinct, but then I'd tell myself that the Aliane I was missing had been gone for years. The day I'd met Leona was April 26th, and I counted down the days until May 5th. As excited as I was, though, some part of me just felt that disappointment was inevitable. That I'd sit out there all day waiting for her, and she'd never show. Even worse was that May 5th was a Saturday, so I really had no idea when she planned on showing up. I spent my days either dreaming of Leona at work or sitting out at the Leap and thinking about her. Finally, May 5th arrived. I won't lie, I woke up that morning in a cold sweat. As much as I wanted to believe she'd show, somehow, deep inside, just knew she wasn't going to come. Tried to imagine her stepping into the clearing, seeing her beautiful eyes again, hearing her intoxicating voice. But all I could envision was the hours ticking by, waiting in the hot seat for her to arrive, and finally sulking away back to my car at dusk, alone and disappointed like always. I got to the Leap around 1 o'clock in the afternoon. I brought a basket with some sandwiches and fruit, and 2 bottles of sweet tea. It might have been a bit much, but that first impression she chose to make really stuck with me. I figured I'd be brazen too. I leaned against the tree, taking out my pocket knife that never left my side, cutting up an apple and eating it casually. When I finished, I added more to a story I was working on. Then, around 3 o'clock, my writing was interrupted. Against all odds, I heard someone walking up the hill. My palms were clammy, and my heart raced. I could barely breathe, staring in the direction of the sound. She stepped out of the trees. I met her hypnotic turquoise eyes, her soft, smiling pink lips, her sun-kissed face. Today, she wore a pink flannel, and once again carried her guitar case. "Hey, Sam," she smiled. "Hey, Liana." I grinned. My entire body was alight with thrill and relief. She came over and sat next to me, and I breathed in her perfume, withdrawing an ecstatic sigh. "So, I brought us some lunch," I smiled, opening the picnic basket. "I got sandwiches and fruit. There are ham and cheese, turkey with mayo, and peanut butter and jelly. And then some apples and bananas." "Aw, Sam," she smiled at me. "You brought me lunch." "Yeah." And I stuck my hand in the basket. I handed her a bottle of sweet tea. "Hope you like sweet tea. This is so thoughtful." "Aw, really, it was nothing." She told me that Clover was a lot like Sherman, with just a slightly bigger population of 6,000, and a similar situation with only one high school in town. She told me that she was decently popular, but she didn't really like any of her classmates. She said they were all fake, with materialistic priorities, and she had no one to really talk to, at least beyond a surface level. She said that guys were all over her, treating her like some trophy they were all competing to obtain, but that none of them actually took the time to just sit down and get to know her. She said her home situation was a lot like mine. She was also an only child, and her family was mostly never around. But her father was Clover's very own chief of police, and he could be really controlling, which added a lot of stress to her life. Still, the more we talked, the more I realized our lives were pretty similar. She said she'd started playing guitar and singing when she was 10, and it was something for her to do when she was bored and alone at home. At first, I wondered if she could really relate to loneliness. Maybe she didn't spend a lot of time with people, but unlike me, it was her choice. She was swimming in attention, invited to parties, approached by classmates. She didn't have to spend a single weekend alone if she didn't want to. The more she explained it, the more I realized just how unfulfilling her situation was too. She was enveloped by people that didn't really care about her, just wanted her for her looks, and no one tried or cared to understand her. I began to really sympathize with her. That had to be isolating in its own way. We stayed out there until dark. This time, before she left, she did something that surprised me. "Well, Sam," she smiled at me, "it was fun. Until next time." May 13th. I nodded. "Can't wait." She looked at me for a moment. Then she embraced her soft arms wrapped around me, and I breathed in her scent, feeling her chest pressed against mine. I was paralyzed with butterflies. "Thanks for getting to know me, Sam," she whispered softly, her warm breath trickling into my ear. "Of course, Liana," I whispered back. "Oh, Estrican." She leaned back, and then she softly kissed my cheek. She looked immediately embarrassed about it, chortling with rosy cheeks as I stared at her in wordless bewilderment, probably looking like a complete and utter idiot. Then she turned, walking off into the woods. "Next Sunday," she called again. "Next Sunday," I called back, my heart firing on all cylinders. "Have a nice night, Sam." The old lady departed, walking off to her car. "You too, ma'am," I called back, standing behind the cash register. It was Saturday, May 12th, a week from when I'd last seen Liana. I was on the closing shift at Shaw's and couldn't wait to get off work. All night, all I could think about was Leona. Tomorrow, I was determined to get her number. Then we could talk all the time. I stared at my watch. 8:52 p.m., just 8 more minutes, and I could start the closing procedures. Then, to my surprise, I felt my phone vibrate in my pocket. Scanned the area for my manager, Luther. Ascertaining he was nowhere in sight, I pulled out my phone, wondering who on earth had sent me a message. It was a Snapchat message from Alien. Wow, I thought. How damn bizarre. We hadn't spoken at all since the phone call. It had been about 3 weeks. At around 10 o'clock, finally clocked out and walked through the chilly night to my red Accord in the starlit parking lot. I climbed inside, turning the heat on, then tapped the message, surprised by how nervous I was to do so. Sam, I miss you. This shocked me. I couldn't believe she'd even noticed me gone. Hey, Allie. I miss you too. I went to shift the gear to drive, but she already responded. Surprised, I read the next message. Can we hang out tomorrow? It's been way too long. Aw, sorry, Allie. I'm meeting Leona tomorrow. Maybe Monday. Oh, all right. Sure. Hey, I replied. Want to call tonight? Okay. Drove home. At last, I slid out of my work clothes. Got a hot shower, then crawled into my bed, lying beneath the warm covers. I called Alien, and for the first time in weeks, I heard her voice outside of her Snapchat story. Hey, Sam. Allie, I smiled, and it actually brought me a lot of comfort to hear from her again. I've missed you. You too. A shoal, making me message you first. I chuckled. Yeah, sorry. So, how's life been, Allie? Yeah, not much to talk about, but some good news. Yeah. I gave up on Scott. What? You did? Yeah, you were right, Sam, she sighed. Scott is in a shoal. He really is. The other night, I found him with Elise at Jack's party in his parents' bedroom. Not even Abby. Wow, I laughed. Sounds like Scott. Yeah. So, how's everything going for you? And how are things with Leona? It's going great. Honestly, things are going great for me. I know I've only hung out with her twice, but when I'm with her, I just feel understood. I don't know. It's really something. I can't wait to see her tomorrow. I basically spend all my time just sitting around and looking forward to the next time I see her. Chuckled. Wow, she replied. She's really something, Yeah, she really is. Well, get a picture of her for me next time. So, I know you're not making it up, she smiled dully. Oh, all right, I laughed. Sure. Why have you only seen her twice? Is she really busy or something? I don't know. Just never asked to meet her anywhere besides Loser's Leap. She just tells me the next time she's going, and then I meet her there. But tomorrow, I'm going to try to get her number, so we can talk more. Well, that's awesome, Sam. I'm glad it's working out for you. Me too, Allie. Me too. I haven't been this happy in a while. Allie didn't say anything for a moment. Sam, remember when we were like 9? And you caught that wally? It was absolutely huge. Yeah, I laughed. That thing was like 5 feet long. And we cooked it up for supper. We just sat out there by the river all night, telling each other ghost stories and stuff. I miss that. You do? Yeah. I mean, that was fun. We should do something like that again sometime. You and me. Go camping. I was speechless. Yeah. I mean, unless you think it'd be weird or something. Nah, Ollie. Totally love to do that. But wouldn't you be busy at a party or something? No, I won't be. Maybe next weekend. Maybe. I'll see when Leona wants to meet next, okay? Oh, all right. Cool. Her tone changed. You good, Allie? Yeah. The rest of the night, we talked casually. I won't lie, it was awesome hearing from her again. It reminded me how much she meant to me. That even though she was different now, she was still, after all, my best friend. The next day, excitedly drove up to Loser's Leap, blasting Led Zeppelin in my car. Couldn't believe that so many people were afraid of that place. And yet, for me, it was where I was more alive than anywhere else. When I got there, this time, Leona was waiting for me. When she saw me, she ran up and hugged me. Once again, I was hit with butterflies. We talked for a while, and finally, I mustered up the courage to ask, "Hey, Leona, do you think that maybe I could get your number? Or your social media or something?" "I don't have social media," she admitted. "My dad's pretty protective. And my number?" She seemed to be debating it, but then she frowned. "I don't think it'd be a good idea. I'm sorry, Sam. Really, I wish I could." "Oh, well, I get it. Seriously, don't sweat it. We can keep meeting here, though," she smiled. "Okay." I smiled back. "Well, if not that, can I get a picture of us together? Maybe this sounds creepy, but when we don't see each other for a while, I sort of wish I at least had a picture of you to look at." "Aw," she blushed. "Sam, just don't like taking pictures of myself. Please, Leona." Not today. My makeup's horrible." "No, it's not," I chuckled. "You look great, Leona." "Sam," she whispered. To my surprise, she extended her hand, cupping my cheek. My body was paralyzed. Her soft fingers caressed my face as her hypnotic turquoise eyes stole my breath. "I don't mean to be so dodgy. Can I make up for it with a kiss?" "Do you with what?" I stammered. She smirked. Then her eyes shut, and she leaned in, pressing her soft lips against mine. I could hardly breathe, if I'm being honest. All throughout my life, I heard so much about platitudinous things like true love's kiss, fireworks, sparks, blah, blah, blah. But the two girls I'd ever kissed felt nothing like that. Me and Aldian kissed in first grade. We didn't even know what we were doing, just saw it on a TV show and tried it out. And then in 8th grade, I kissed a girl, my first girlfriend, though I didn't feel anything for her really, and only agreed to date her because I thought it might be fulfilling. This kiss, however, was incomparably different. It left me spellbound, completely absorbed in the moment. It was something more than just two people's lips touching. It was a magic, electrical connection. I don't even want to know how cringy my expression was when she leaned back. You kissed." "Yeah, sorry," she giggled. "Don't apologize," I chortled. I exhaled. "It's okay, Leona. The thing about your dad and stuff. It's okay. We'll just keep meeting here." She looked a lot more touched by that than I would have guessed she'd be. "Yay," she breathed. For the next 2 months, we saw each other just about every weekend. Sadly, Allie and I never got around to camping. I suggested meeting up with Leona and Clover, but she reminded me that her father was the chief of police, and if a cop saw her with me, he'd tell her dad. Then we'd probably never see each other again. Obviously, not wanting to risk that, I was okay with just meeting at the Leap. Still, when I was lonely, I'd listen to the recording I'd secretly taken of her while she was singing because she was too shy to outright let me film her. By the end of July, the two of us were dating, and though I don't think Allie believed me that she was real, because Leona wouldn't let me take a picture of her, Every time I offered Allie to come out to Loser's Leap with me to meet her, she said she didn't want anything to do with that place. Though seeing Leona was awesome, she was getting increasingly depressed with every visit. She told me more and more about her controlling father, and how she felt like he was suffocating her. She said that sometimes she honestly did think I was the only good thing in her life. It broke my heart, but if I'm being totally upfront, it also kind of warmed it at the same time. How could I be lucky enough to be the one who was there for her? I was so honored I could be the one to cheer her up. It was now July 18th, a Wednesday, and I was out at Loser's Leap, writing a poem. That Friday, I was scheduled to meet Leona again. At around 6 o'clock, to my shock, I heard someone coming up the path. I wondered for a moment if it was Leona, but when a stranger stepped out, I instantly felt on edge. "Oh," the woman gasped. She seemed to be in her early 30s. She was tan with dark hair and eyes. "I'm sorry if I scared you," I apologized. No, my bad," she laughed awkwardly. "Just didn't expect to see anyone up here." "Me either. So, what brings you up here?" "Oh, well, does the name Cassidy Bayers sound familiar to you?" "Cassidy Bayers, kind of. She committed suicide here 10 years ago. 10 years ago to the day, actually. I'm her sister." "Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that." "It's okay." She sat down on a rock. "Yep, 10 years ago today, Cassidy took her life here. I guess I was just coming out here to pay my respects. After all, that grave of hers is empty. Her body was never found, so this is the real last place she ever was." I don't know what to say. I confessed. "I'm just so sorry that happened." "Yeah, it's like they say. You learn to accept it, but you never really get over it. I could have been a much better sister to her. I really neglected her back then. Didn't realize it until it was too late." "Hey." I tried to console her, noticing she really needed someone to talk to. "It's not your fault." "Maybe not, but maybe there was something I could have done. Sorry." "I'm sorry," she sighed awkwardly. "None of this is your problem. You probably just came up here to be alone." No, it's fine. If you need to talk about anything, I've got nowhere else to be." "Well, She was clearly troubled, and couldn't hide it on her face. "What is it?" "Look, I'm sorry to be dropping all this on you. There's something the papers never published about Cassidy. And sometimes it just really bothers me." The words made me uncomfortable. "What is it?" "She used to come here to meet somebody," she revealed. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. I can't remember her name now. It was so long ago. All I remember is that she'd come out here to visit with someone. Said that she was her only friend. I'd always ask her why she never had her friend over, but she'd tell me her friend's dad wouldn't be okay with it or something. It never made a lot of sense to me. She kept inviting me out here to meet her, and finally, one day, after she'd left, something just didn't feel right. I decided I'd come out here to meet her friend. I got to the parking grounds and saw Cassidy's car and walked the trail all the way up here to the leap. But she seemed to tremble. "What?" asked calmly. She was talking. But there was nobody there. "What?" I whispered. She was having a full-fledged conversation with no one. My body was covered in goosebumps. "Yeah," the woman nodded. "I know." I was terrified too. I thought that maybe I could hear another voice, but there was definitely no one there besides Cassidy. Walked out of the tree line, and Cassidy yelled, "Hey, where are you going?" Then she turned around and told me I scared her friend off. But nobody ran away. Nobody left. There was no one there besides Cassidy and me. I didn't even know what to say. I told our mom about it, but she didn't believe me, and I can't really doubt her. She was sure I just missed the girl somehow. And then, sure enough, one day, Cassidy came out here to meet her friend and disappeared. Do you think she was like, I don't know, crazy? She asked. Yeah. I don't know. Maybe she was doing drugs. I really don't know. But with the rumors about this place, and then that happening, listen, something about this place just isn't right. I know it's pretty, and that out here you get to be alone. Cassidy used to say all that stuff, but there's something evil out here, and that's why Cassidy, and so many people before her, took their lives here. Just know it, after what I saw that day. I'm surprised that after seeing that, you'd come out here by yourself. Well, I'm not totally alone, she admitted. My husband's in the car. If I'm not back in 30 minutes, he's supposed to come up here looking for, but I just wanted some alone time with Cassidy on the 10th anniversary of her death, or disappearance or whatever. Well, I'll give you some alone time. I started to walk away, but she called, Hey, just be careful coming up here. All right. I nodded. I will, thanks. Ever since that night, Loser's Leap, for the first time ever, creeped me out. When I got home, I sat at my desk and Googled Cassidy Bayer's suicide. Some articles came up, all about how she'd one day simply disappeared after coming out there. None of them specified her meeting a friend, except one, which included a testimony from her sister stating she'd been visiting someone on a leap. Police searched for suspects but found nothing. The more I looked into it, the more I realized how mysterious her death was. For the most part, she didn't seem very depressed. No one really saw it coming. And then one day, she simply disappeared, and it was ruled a suicide. She didn't have a lot of friends, and her family said they felt responsible for not giving her enough attention. But still, she didn't seem suicidal to anyone. Out of curiosity, I decided to look into the history of Loser's Leap. A lot of the deaths were rumors, some proven untrue, and others plausible, and the Native American story was folklore, impossible to validate or not. But then I looked into Ricardo Elias's death. Something about this that confused me was that, unlike the popular legend described, he wasn't cornered by law enforcement on the hill. Police simply found his body at the base of it on the riverbed, and discovered that he was a draft dodger from South Florida when they eventually identified him. When his corpse turned up in the paper, numerous townspeople explained that they'd seen him around for a couple of months, and that though his mission to escape conscription was unknown to them, when he'd first arrived in town, he seemed to be in a hurry, and then, mysteriously, he settled down and didn't leave. He even got a job as a woodcutter, and his employers said he didn't come across as suicidal at all. Even though it was assumed the pressures of getting caught and sent to prison or Vietnam eventually drew him over the edge, he wasn't close to getting caught, and he didn't show suicidal tendencies to anyone that interacted with him. And then I looked into Mike Merkel's death in 1986. It was harder to find specific information about him, but to my shock, his story sounded similar to Cassidy's. A lot of articles detailed that he was lonely and showed signs of deep depression, but one of them explained there was a police investigation into his death being a homicide, and that perhaps he was pushed. A close friend of his mentioned he'd been meeting a girl there. A girl named Liana. Police searched for a Liana in Sherman and the towns nearby, but the one and only girl they met with that name didn't fit the description. A young woman with blonde hair and light eyes. When I read that, I can't describe the terror I felt. I mean, what were the odds? It couldn't be a coincidence. The article went on to say that they were dating, but Mike's friend had never met her, and she only met with Mike at Loser's Leap, just like my Leona. His story and Cassidy's story were identical to mine. I was meeting a Leona at Loser's Leap, who would never meet with me anywhere else. She looked like the girl described in Mike Merkel's homicide investigation. Blonde hair with light eyes, and just like Cassidy's sister had told me, she mentioned having a controlling father that made it impossible for her to meet me anywhere else but Loser's Leap. Still, she was Leona. Leona, my girlfriend, the girl who I thought about all the time, who would sing to me and read my poetry and take my mind off my boring, pointless life. How could she be some monster, some evil spirit or something? It couldn't be real. I would have laughed if it wasn't so painful and unnerving. On Friday, after school, I ran into Aliane before I left to go to the forest. "Hey, weirdo," she smiled at me, flicking her straight brown hair out of her face, her big green eyes centered on me. "You going out to your creepy little hill?" "Allie," my voice carried an unusual seriousness, and I could tell she picked up on it. "Listen to me. If I don't text you in 2 hours, send police to Loser's Leap." "All right." "Whoa, what? Sam, what are you talking about?" "I don't really know how to explain it. I'm going to tell you all about it tonight, though, okay? Looks like you were right though, Allie." I smiled at her. "There is something wrong with Leona." "Never should have doubted you." "What do you mean, Sam? You're not thinking about jumping?" "Of course not. I'm not suicidal." "Allie." I grabbed her shoulders, looking into her eyes. "I'm not suicidal. So if you find my body at the base of that hill, it wasn't a suicide." "Okay. Sam, you're scaring me." "Allie." I hugged her. "Listen, it's going to be okay. All right. I'll call you tonight." Ran off. I got in my car and drove away. She watched me the entire time, until I exited the parking lot, staring at me like it was the last time she was ever going to see me. As I drove to Loser's Leap, I felt a strong mix of emotions. First and foremost was fear. I didn't believe in ghosts. I never did. But the odds. What were the odds that all the deaths would line up so precisely with my situation? It wasn't conventional at all. And on top of that, why did Ricardo and Mike and Cassidy really die? Did they kill themselves? Were they pushed? Were they manipulated into jumping? I didn't know anything. Just knew that Leona didn't make sense anymore. And neither did their deaths. And worst of all, whatever happened to them was happening to me. But the next feeling, the more powerful one, was an amalgamation of sorrow and betrayal. How could my beautiful Leona is trying to kill me? Could she really be trying to hurt me? The girl I'd sit with and look out at the river, talking with about anything and everything for months on end. Showing her my poetry, listening to her beautiful singing. It just couldn't be. Part of me felt embarrassed that this had to all be a ridiculous misunderstanding. And then, another part of me even felt angry. Angry that I was being lied to. I knew how I'd find out for sure, though, what Leona was, if she were some spirit, or if this was all a massive Assassinin conspiracy theory. Pulled up at Loser's Leap. For the first time, I felt nervously stepping away from my car and into the forest. I walked up the trail that had brought me so much catharsis, excitement, and tranquility. But now all it brought was trepidation, anxiousness, and longing. When I got to the hilltop, I could see Leona through the trees. Slowly, I took out my phone. I went to my camera and held it up. Before my eyes, Leona sat beneath the branches, her head between her arms. And on my camera, there was absolutely nothing. My heart froze over. I placed my phone down on the tree branch and started recording, aiming it at the hilltop. Then I walked into the clearing. Leona looked up at me, tears streaming down her face. "Sam," she whimpered, trudging over to me. She collapsed into my arms. "My father, he found out about me coming here. He's not letting me come back again." Once again, I felt a turbulent mix of emotions. I was heartbroken to see her crying. I was terrified that this murderous, paranormal figure was alone with me in the wilderness. And I was in love with her, wanting nothing more than to wipe her tears away and make her feel better. "What do you mean?" I went along with it. "He asked me where I've been." She sniffled, her turquoise eyes red with tears, now locked with mine. I just didn't have a cover-up anymore. He'd heard all my excuses. "Sam, he's not letting me come back out here anymore. He probably has half of the Clover Police Department looking for me as we speak." "What does this mean for us?" She was silent for a moment. "That's it. We won't be able to see each other anymore." Despite everything I knew, this crushed me. "Leona, no." "Sam." She sounded broken at first when her tone changed. "Sam." She looked up at me, a sternness in her eyes. Let's end it. Let's kill ourselves. Together. I don't want to live without you." "And what else do you have, Sam?" "Ian, your shitty parents. Let's just die together. Hand in hand, my love." I couldn't help but imagine Mike Merkel standing here in her arms, tearing up beneath his glasses, seeing Ricardo abandoning everything for love, escaping Vietnam and prison with her in his arms, Cassidy's nodding as she decided death would be better than losing her only friend. But I couldn't resist playing the act just a little longer, no matter what she was, no matter what was happening. I was in love with her. "I never want to lose you, Leona. Come on, love." She kissed me tenderly. "Together, we'll die together." We walked over to the ledge of Loser's Leap, looking out over the river and at the wilderness beyond. It was breathtaking even now. Leona's warm fingers curled around mine. Then I took a deep breath. "Is this the same thing you told Mike and Ricardo and Cassidy?" I asked suddenly. She froze. Slowly, her head turned toward me, meeting my eyes. "What?" "I know, Leona. I know about their deaths. What really happened? What are you, Leona? What do you get out of this? Why do you do it? What are you talking about, Sam?" I sighed a long, bitter sigh. Then I shoved her off the cliff. For a moment, her body descended to the riverbed below. Then, to my complete and utter disbelief, she simply faded away into thin air, simply ceasing to exist. Stood there a while, simply looking out onto the ledge, wondering what had happened. After what felt like an eternity, I walked back through the woods to my car, every sound magnified in the eerie silence that followed. When I reached my car, I drove home in a daze, my mind swirling with countless questions and the haunting image of Leona vanishing. I didn't go back to Loser's Leap. I couldn't. Instead, I focused on picking up the pieces of my life, reconnecting with Alien, and trying to make sense of the unbelievable events I'd experienced. Over time, the raw fear and confusion dulled, but the memories of Leona, both tender and terrifying, lingered. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. Life slowly returned to a semblance of normality, but the shadow of Loser's Leap never fully receded from my thoughts. It remained a dark backdrop to my everyday existence, a reminder of the mysteries that lay just beyond the reach of understanding. In the end, I never fully understood what Leona was or why she had come into my life. Whether she was a ghost, a spirit, or something else entirely, her presence had changed me forever. Loser's Leap, with its haunting beauty and tragic past, had become a part of me, a silent witness to the complexity of life and death, forever etched in my mind as a place where reality blurred and the supernatural seemed all too real. Held. I am I'm so close I can taste it. I hold 518 of 538 objects. Every runner quickens their pace when the end is in sight. Every seeker quickens their heartbeat with every object they find. Which one will end their quest alive? I've asked myself this, time and again. The answer has always been the same. As I open the door to a mental institution in Wales, I'm suddenly not so sure. The location looks and smells like all the others. Gray, imposing, damp, reeking of despair. This isn't a place that well-meaning friends and family members visit, bearing bouquets and greeting cards. Once you're locked up here, you're forgotten. Will I be erased in the same manner? Only time and my contact will tell. I warily approach the desk, manned by an even warier receptionist. None of them greet you with a grin. I used to think they wore masks of professional prudence, but such veils have been torn asunder with each of my visits. They're incapable of smiling. Closing my eyes and clearing my throat, I attempt my best Welsh. Ruin Cesio Deliad Edifurge. I seek the holder of remorse. The receptionist pours himself a glass of water from a pitcher on the desk. I hear the gurgling in his throat, see his Adam's apple bob up and down. How long has it been since he's taken a drink? I suspect he hasn't quenched his thirst as the last seeker made the same request. Impossible. No. Here, all things may come to pass. He finishes and checks to make sure no one else is around. Then he shows me what he holds in his ever-busy hands. An ever-turning prayer wheel, crafted of ruby. What's a Buddhist artifact doing in Welsh territory? I want to ask, but my mouth won't move. I realize this question is as foolish as the one that began my journey. What happens when they all come together? Struggling to keep myself from remembering the answer, I wait for the holders. Mayor da ohonam in a wybod. I shake my head, not understanding. We both know it, he says, but his lips don't move. He makes no sound. This, of course, is only natural. They can all read minds. What surprises me is this one's gentleness, his cautious care. Most of the holders I've met and defeated, bamboozled, beaten, cajoled, inveigled, and tricked, have been indifferent at best, hostile at worst. This man, spinning the wheel at a fixed pace in a clockwise direction, is circumspect. Why do you seek the objects? He asks me. For knowledge, because knowledge is power. The holder smiles. I slap my hand over my mouth to keep from screaming. And what has it cost you? Everything, like the old stories say. No, more than that. I shudder as I recall the bodies I've broken, the minds I've shattered, and the souls I've damned. In my quest to reunite the 538, I've doomed hundreds and thousands more. Saul and King David have nothing on a seeker. You sound proud of that. Are you? I consider my answer. The lobby of the institution, already chilly, drops to cold. I'm proud I've come this far. Try not to think about what I've done to reach you. Yet you do. There's no use denying it. You survive on no food, water, air, or sleep. In fact, you don't need them anymore. Because of the objects, which siphon your humanity little by little, you have become as they are. Not completely, there are still 20 to be found, but you're far enough along to consider humanity beneath you. Am I right? I don't even think about lying to the holder. I simply nod. From the moment they wake to the moment they fall asleep, most humans boldly do what you secretly hate yourself for doing. They lie. They cheat. They steal and kill. They stamp others' faces beneath their boots because others stand in their way. Their desires are less grand than yours, but not by much. They seek only one object: fame, fortune, knowledge, personal power, even love, but the means they use to achieve their ends are the same. Not all of them are murderers, but, ultimately, that doesn't make much difference. The holder nods. Why? As Christians say, sin is sin. As I say, death is death, of the body or the soul. What about the spirit? Ah, the holder smiles again, and it freezes my blood. That's what's really being siphoned. Explain to me, if you will, the difference between the soul and the spirit. The soul is the part of you that loves its creator, whom we call God, and wants to reunite with him, just like the 538 objects seek to be reunited. I shudder. The spirit, on the other hand, is the part of you that's, well, you, separate and unique. It doesn't want to reunite with God, whether the creator or any other deity. It seeks godhood in its own right, to live forever as a master of the transcended universe. Correct. And you say the objects are siphoning my spirit. The part that's me. Also correct. That makes no sense. Why wouldn't they want to drain my creator's energy? Because, believe it or not, you are stronger. Stronger than God, despite myself. I laugh out loud. That's absurd. I'm only a mortal. Indeed. At the moment you reunite the 538, you'll be immortal. Something clicks, with no body, soul, or spirit. That makes no sense. Your soul will remain intact, groaning under the weight of your sins for eternity. Remember, it loves God and wishes to be absorbed within him. Once you yourself become a god, you become his eternal enemy, which he cannot defeat. I don't have enough time to tell you why he can't, for my own hour draws near. Fine. I stretch out my hand. May I see the prayer wheel, please? It's exquisite. Before I surrender it, I'll make my counter-proposal. I offer you a choice. Either you take the wheel, add it to your treasure trove, and continue your mission, or I make you its next holder. If you choose the former, you might die and be damned. If you choose the latter, your hands will become cleansed of death, your mind free of all torment, your soul revived, and your spirit restored. The objects shall release it. Wait. If the objects are vampiric and contain bits and pieces of my spirit, why wouldn't I get it back once I reunite them? Unless I myself become an object. Precisely. Idol, not made of gold or stone, but a cruel conglomerate of what you have collected. You'll be worshipped by the multitudes perishing under your omnipotent, omniscient, and omnipresent gaze. Notice I didn't say omnibenevolent. You'll be omnimalevolent. All that humanity knows of evil will be embodied by you. You'll teach them to save and damn themselves at the same time. That's the price of the power you seek. But I'm already evil. I have forsaken the path of goodness 518 times. How and why should I quit now? That's like signing the devil's contract and leaving the last letter off your name. A mere technicality. Why shouldn't I finish what I've started? The holder, while spinning the wheel with one hand, lays his other one upon mine. That last letter is the difference between repentance and not being able to repent. The turning and the tipping point. Yes, you've come this far, but what has your journey given you? Strength, wisdom, and knowledge beyond measure. What has it taken from you? Everything else. Everything that made you strong, wise, and knowledgeable in a human sense. Don't underestimate the power of your kind. For every evil deed someone does, someone else does good. For every murder, theft, betrayal of love and honor, there is a life saved, a possession returned to its rightful owner, a vow and a lover sustained, and an obligation fulfilled. That is the duty I hold and the balance I uphold. Every time I turn the wheel, I right a wrong, but the balance is tipping in evil's favor. I can now see my breath in the foyer of the institution. Its temperature is dropping fast. That's why I must turn it ever so steadily. 1 rotation per second. No more, no less. What if you turn it faster? Then evil will match and eventually surpass the pace. I swallow hard. Let's return to the issue at hand. Why would I forfeit my chance to become a god? An evil one, sure, but with more power than the Creator himself. You said I'd become an object, But at least I'd be a sentient object, right? The holder nods. Okay. I won't be the gorgeous goddess I've dreamed of being ever since I was a child. Instead, I'll be this hideous mishmash of everything that I've collected so far. The idea repulses me, but what do appearances matter if you're a deity? Even if I don't and can't shapeshift, I'll still hold every single iota of power in every single universe. That's the truth about these objects, isn't it? I'm the only one from this universe, or at least I will be. The other ones are from parallel universes, aren't they? Another nod. If they want to reunite, then that means they want to reach a singularity through me. Yes. And if they do, the air freezes in my throat. I cough. Then all the horrors I witnessed at the start of my mission will come to pass. But I don't know how or why. Can you tell me? The holder coughs as well. I'm afraid. Only the holder of the journey knows. The last one. If I beat them, take their object, make it mine, then victory at last. Is it? The holder at the reception desk offers me the ruby wheel. Heed my words, my prayers. I will retire to eternal rest or eternal anguish. It's up to you. Will you sacrifice the last shred of yourself to turn into what you already know will destroy you? Will you become proud of what causes good people to take their own lives in guilt and shame? I am no preacher, no wise man. I am only what I say I am. Is that a frost crystal on my cheek? Are more forming as I weep. Our time is running short. Within 30 seconds, we'll freeze to death. Words fly out of my constricting mouth before my brain registers their meaning. I want what the objects can give me. I'm proud and wicked. Still, I need. Say it. Redemption. Yet if I find it, I'll lose all the power I've gained. The holder is weeping too. Choose wisely. How sweet it would be to make amends, to wash the slate clean, to turn the wheel. Yet how much sweeter would it be to usurp and kill the God who created me, to be the real Lord of Lords among all universes. Such power has called to us both. I beg you to resist. 20 seconds. I become an idol, the object of all objects. Destroy the demiurge. What then? A vision. The 538 finally fusing and shattering apart, flying to the countless corners of existence. No, it can't be. Everything that is, has been. All that will be, shall be again, if they. I fall to the floor, my muscles stiff as boards. With the last of my strength, I cry. I'll hold it. I'll hold. My mentor presses his prayer wheel into my frozen hand and squeezes it. Warmth returns to the room, flooding us. The holder sublimates into vapor, rising and floating out the only window in the room, rising up to the stars. The voice in my mind, Sinalai Seiflander. Dialch in 4, friend. Maintain the pace. Thank you, friend.